My parents mocked my gardening dream, seating me far at my brother's wedding, but now their restaurant thrives on my vision. I was always aware as a child that I was unique among my relatives. I am a 35-year-old woman who comes from a long family of prosperous upstate New York restaurateurs. My mother, 60, oversees all of the employees at our family's traditional Italian restaurant, which is governed with an iron hand by my father, 65. Next is my 38-year-old older brother Mike, who is the golden kid destined to take over the company. I've been employed with Liberty Mutual Insurance for 10 years, moving up the corporate ladder to become a senior claims adjuster. My name frequently appeared on quarterly performance awards, and my office on the 28th floor had a breathtaking view of Central Park. I had a six-figure salary, a cozy condo in Manhattan, and the pride of my parents, who never stopped boasting about their successful business daughter. On paper, I was living the American dream. However, I felt like I was slowly suffocating every morning as I looked at my computer screen while going over accident claims. My escape, my lunch breaks in the little rooftop garden I had designed on our office building, was the only thing that kept me going. I had persuaded management to allow me to renovate the abandoned area, paying for it out of pocket. Spending thousands on soil, planters, and seasonal flowers made my coworkers think I was insane, but those priceless moments spent among flowers and herbs were the only times I felt fully alive. I spent almost every weekend in Grandma Rose's garden, which was my genuine haven. The most exquisite garden I had ever seen encircled her Victorian home on the outskirts of town. Grandma Rose was teaching me the language of flowers, companion planting, and soil pH while my brother spent his weekends studying the restaurant industry. One day in particular, while I was assisting her with planting springtime tulip bulbs, stands out in my memory. The air was crisp with the aroma of falling leaves, and it was early October. My hands were in the dirt for longer than required, and Grandma saw it. She patted the ground with her aged hands and said, "You feel it too, don't you?" I nodded, unable to put into words how it felt to work with plants and how alive I felt in her garden. That connection to the earth. Not everyone has it, you know? It's a gift. She showed me her treasured collection of gardening diaries that day, which included decades worth of handwritten notes about every plant she had ever grown, complete with meticulous sketches and pressed flowers. "Someday," she continued, "these will be yours when you're ready to follow your true path." The pivotal moment occurred during Thanksgiving dinner the previous year. With the aroma of turkey and Dad's special gravy filling the air, it was the typical after-hours family get-together at the restaurant. Mike was showcasing the new wine cellar at the restaurant, his most recent endeavor that Dad had readily approved. As I sat there, fingering the admission letter from the New York Botanical Garden School of Professional Horticulture in my pocket, Mom was talking about plans to grow the catering business. I finally plucked up the confidence to eat the pumpkin pie and turkey. I said, my voice hardly steady, "I'm going back to school. I've enrolled in the Botanical Gardens landscape design program." The ensuing hush was deafening. Mom's fork clattered on her plate, and Dad's cheeks turned the color of the cranberry sauce. Mike snorted and almost choked on his booze. "What are you?" The wine glasses vibrated as Dad's voice boomed across the table. "You want to abandon your work to play with plants when you're not getting any younger?" Mom's palm gripped her chest violently as her eyes welled up with tears. "But you're a senior claims adjuster, honey. How many individuals would kill for your job, do you know? How is your 401k doing? Your health insurance?" Every time he saw me caring for Mom's houseplants, Mike, who had been referring to me as the gardener since we were young, couldn't help but laugh. "So you're going to start gardening like a pro now? Are you insane? Living in a treehouse is the next step." Even though my hands were trembling beneath the table, I made myself keep going. My letter of resignation has already been turned in. The 15th of December is my last day. January is when classes begin. The plates jumped when Dad slammed his hand down on the table. "You can't count on our assistance if you do this. We didn't send you to business school only to see you lose everything because of a midlife crisis." Grandma Rose was the only one who stayed composed, purposefully putting down her wineglass. With that quiet power that could still make my father feel like a little boy, she asked him, "Joe, when was the last time you were genuinely happy doing anything you didn't pick for yourself?" Feeling defeated, I drove to Grandma Rose's house the day after the Thanksgiving catastrophe. She was cutting her beloved roses in her garden when I discovered her. She was wearing her favorite faded blue gardening apron, the one with pockets filled with plant identifiers and trimming tools, even though it was cold in November. As I assisted her with the pruning, I remarked, "Grandma, they don't understand. They believe that I'm wasting my life. They might be correct. Maybe starting again at 35 is crazy of me. Putting down her shears, Grandma Rose gazed at me with those sage eyes that had witnessed so much. Your parents don't see the world the way we do, but they just want what's best for you, sweetie. These plants and the earth itself are magical. It would be a sin to throw away your gift. She showed me her greenhouse and her most fragile plants. She showed me a tiny orchid that was having trouble blooming as the warm, humid air surrounded us. Take a look at this one. I knew better, even though everyone insisted it couldn't be saved. The most exquisite things don't often show themselves right away. Like you, sweetheart. I began taking seminars at the New York Botanical Garden that winter. Basic living expenses and 2 years of schooling would be covered by the money I saved from the insurance company. I gave up my view of Manhattan for a little balcony where I could try container gardening when I moved to a smaller apartment in the Bronx, nearer the school. The program proved to be more difficult than I had anticipated. Landscape design required intricate calculations, a thorough understanding of ecological and architectural principles. It wasn't just about making things seem nice. My dreams were filled with plant combinations and garden designs, and every night I would go to bed feeling both tired and content. Rachel, a 28-year-old classmate with bright red hair and contagious energy, became my best friend. One day, as we were working on our CAD projects, she said to me, "You should see your face when you're designing. You seem to be speaking your mother tongue at last." However, family get-togethers turned into an endurance test. Even though I shifted from the family table to the bar, I continued to go to the restaurant for Sunday dinners. Mike would joke that I hadn't mastered the art of properly pushing a lawnmower yet. While Mom would give me newspaper clippings about corporate employment openings, Dad would sourly discuss Mike's intentions to expand the restaurant. I entered a little landscape design competition 6 months into my education. It was merely a small-scale event organized by the city's gardening association. Making sustainable urban areas that could meet social and environmental objectives was the main goal of my design. I was shocked to take first place. Even a brief item about it appeared in the local paper. At our next Sunday supper, I eagerly broke the news in the hopes that it would finally alter their viewpoint. Rather, Dad hardly raised his head from his plate. "That's good, honey, but when will you start living your life seriously?" Mike added, grinning as always. "Hey, perhaps you could create a garden for the dumpster area at the restaurant. Make it appear really fancy." In an attempt to be helpful in her own way, my mother said, "You know, if you apologized, Liberty Mutual would definitely accept you back. Mrs. Henderson informed me that your post has not yet been filled." I contacted Grandma Rose that evening as I was driving home with tears clouding my vision. As I vented my frustrations to her, she listened to me calmly. She disclosed, "Your father was the same way when he started the restaurant. His father wished for him to pursue a career in law. Look at him now. He is so certain that his path is the only one. It's interesting how life comes full circle, my love." As the months went by, my abilities improved. Small commissions began coming in, initially from friends and then from their friends. One local lifestyle blog showcased my container garden designs. My family, however, was unimpressed. As Mike continued his increasingly venomous gardener jokes, Dad would shift the topic anytime my work came up. Afterwards, Grandma Rose received the devastating news that her cancer was aggressive. She disappeared in a matter of weeks. She was still trying to give me gardening advice while propped up in her hospital bed the last time I visited her. "The winter bulbs," she said in a feeble but determined tone, "remember to place them sufficiently deep. And never forget that you're doing precisely what you were supposed to do, my love." I had no idea at the time that the circumstances leading up to my brother's impending wedding would fundamentally alter the relationships of our family. However, that is a tale that is worthy of being told separately. First update. I wanted to explain what transpired at my brother's wedding and the fallout after my last post received so much attention. 3 weeks have passed since my previous post, and a lot has changed. First, Grandma Rose's will underwent an unexpected change. She bequeathed to me her entire home and yard, which is currently valued at well over $800,000. For years, Dad had had his eye on that property, intending to use it for more restaurant parking. Dad's face took on that recognizable purple hue when the attorney revealed her choice. "This is absurd," he blew up. Mike was even blunter. He scoffed and said, "Great, now she can really play gardener with her own little kingdom." Amanda, his 32-year-old fiancée, snickered next to him and was already treating me with the same disdain as my brother. The fascinating part, though, is that there was a condition attached to the property. Grandma's plan for the garden had to guide my development and upkeep. She had left behind thorough plans and notebooks that included ideas for transforming a portion of the garden into a demonstration of environmentally friendly urban gardening. In order to save some of Grandma's rarest plants, I threw myself into remodeling the garden and collaborating with neighborhood conservation organizations. After word spread, I was contacted by a reputable gardening magazine about including the renovation in their Heritage Garden series. My brother's wedding followed. The large cream envelope containing the invitation was dripping with self-importance and gold foil. Given that Amanda's father owns half of the county's real estate, it was obviously intended to wow her affluent family. I made the decision to go, and I wore a basic yet stylish designer dress that I had purchased with some of the money I won from my competition. The ceremony was held at the most costly location in town, and Mike made sure everyone knew he had covered all of the costs personally, but I subsequently found out Dad had played a big role. The reception was where the real drama began. I was seated at table 23, which was adjacent to the kitchen doors and literally the farthest table from the main family table, even though we were immediate family. In fact, rather than my name, my place card said the gardener. Amanda went out of her way to introduce me to her acquaintances in the society. "And this is Mike's sister," she continued, smiling patronizingly. "The person who, what do you do again, exactly? Put some flowers in the ground or whatever." Behind their champagne glasses, her companions tittered. However, karma tends to balance things out. A famous event planner who knew me from the gardening magazine story had been engaged by the venue. "Your sustainable garden designs are revolutionary," she said enthusiastically as she approached my table, expressing her honor at meeting me. "I've been keeping along with your Instagram makeover project." The mayor, Amanda's uncle, took the microphone to deliver his address, and that was the real kicker. He complimented my creative designs and highlighted seeing my work on the city's new Sustainable Parks initiative. All of the society members who had been giggling suddenly turned to stare at me with renewed curiosity. As the mayor continued to compliment the family's gifted landscape architect, Dad and Mike sat there with their expressions frozen. Amanda was trying to control the situation by frantically whispering to her companions. Following the speech, a number of Amanda's family members approached me to discuss garden design. The head of the city's Parks and Recreation Department was one of them. For their next urban regeneration project, he said, they were searching for creative designers. Mom called the following day for the first time in months. She spoke hesitantly. "I read the piece on Rose's garden in the magazine. The pictures, they're stunning. There, you've truly created something unique. Although Dad and Mike haven't mentioned anything yet, I've observed that the restaurant's About page now highlights their family's involvement with sustainable urban design. It's ironic that they still haven't offered me congratulations for any of my accomplishments. Next week, I have a meeting with the Parks Department to discuss the urban renewal project. Given that the proposed location is adjacent to my father's restaurant, it would be my largest commission to date. As Grandma Rose used to say, sometimes life has a way of coming full circle." Second update. I appreciate all of your encouraging remarks regarding my most recent update. 2 months have passed since the wedding, and things have changed in unexpected ways. The project for the Parks Department was larger than I had anticipated. They sought to turn an entire city block into a sustainable urban green space, complete with community gardens and an educational center, rather than merely designing a straightforward garden. The catch? The proposal would drastically cut down on parking spaces near nearby establishments, such as my father's restaurant. I noticed my father and Mike sitting in the back row, their faces darkening with every slide of my presentation as the first designs were given at the municipal council meeting. The parking lot they had been using informally for years would be removed as part of the project, and a community area and vertical garden would take its place. Mike got to his feet during the public comment session, his face flushed. "Local businesses will be destroyed by this proposal. Has anyone thought about how it will affect the area's well-known eateries?" He purposefully avoided eye contact with me. The mayor, Amanda's uncle, then raised his voice. "In fact, research indicates that urban green spaces raise property values and foot traffic. There are designated restaurant zones with outdoor dining areas in your sister's design. If anything, this should help your business." Everyone in the room understood the irony. It was obvious that several of the council members were trying not to smile. This is where things become even more intriguing, though. Our family restaurant received an unexpected visit from a Michelin inspector last week. My father had been dreaming about this moment for decades. One little issue, though, was that their famous herb garden, which provided the fresh herbs for their well-known dishes, had suddenly begun to deteriorate. I was working on my project plans at Grandma's place when my mother called me in a panic. "The plants are perishing. Tomorrow, the inspector will return for dinner. Your dad? He's not doing well with it." My father called an hour later. His normally authoritative voice seemed strained. "We need your assistance." "Oh," I spoke in a neutral tone. I didn't think gardening was a legitimate career. He paused for a long moment before asking, "What is your consultation fee?" He choked after I named a figure. $30,000 for consultation and emergency garden rehabilitation. That is robbery on the highway, he spluttered. In actuality, that is less than the going charge for managing horticulture emergencies. However, I'll offer you $25,000 as a family discount. They made the payment in a day. I identified the issue, poor soil pH and drainage problems, applied a fix, and preserved their priceless herbs. The inspector's inspection went well, and the local newspaper included an article about the restaurant's possibility for a Michelin star, emphasizing their creative herb garden created by a family member and famous landscape architect. My father was questioned by the reporter regarding the layout of the garden. When he had to admit my involvement, I saw him fight to suppress his pride. The finest aspect? I had nothing to do with the unsuccessful garden. All they had been doing was following an old gardening book's out-of-date maintenance instructions. They had almost lost their dream review because they had refused to seek advice from an expert, me especially. My father now has to grin and explain that his daughter, the landscape architect, created the restaurant's herb garden whenever someone remarks on it. Since then, the term gardener has not been used in a derogatory manner. The true fulfillment, however, came from an unexpected place. I was recruited to create Amanda's new showpiece garden by her mother, a legendary society queen. Her justification? The expression on Mike and Amanda's faces when they saw me at their house, talking plans with her mother over pricey tea in the conservatory, was priceless. Especially when Amanda's mother mentioned my fee, which was triple what I charged my father without any family discount. Well, darling, if you're good enough for the city's urban renewal project, you're good enough for us. My design studio will formally open next week. The prime location next to the restaurant where my father had been intending to expand was the ideal spot for me. Their herb garden, which I now take care of for a hefty monthly charge, is clearly visible from the wide windows. It's interesting how life works itself out. The irony would have pleased Grandma Rose. Third update. 3 months have passed since my last post, and I would like to offer the story's resolution. Your assistance has been amazing along our journey. The restaurant's adjacent urban renewal project began to attract national attention. The sustainable vertical gardens were featured in a number of major design magazines, and the project was nominated for an annual innovation award by a well-known environmental group. My father's restaurant received unexpected attention as a result of the exposure, but not in the way he had hoped. People started traveling especially to see that cutting-edge eatery with the magnificent herb garden created by the architect-turned-gardener. The family's skillful fusion of horticultural and culinary skills began to be noted by food experts. A documentary team from a well-known streaming service reached out to me last month about including the project in their Urban Change series. The gripping family story about how the restaurateur's daughter transformed urban gardening piqued their curiosity in particular. The producer wanted to shoot in the restaurant and my design studio. Given that local business associations were lauding the project's beneficial effects on the community, my father couldn't say no without coming across as petulant. A feature on the connection between culinary gardens was also desired by Food and Wine magazine. The producer questioned my father about his early resistance to my changing careers throughout the filming. His awkward wriggling as he attempted to explain himself was captured on camera. We only wanted what was best for her, that's all. I had an unexpected visitor at my studio the following day. My dad appeared older and more exposed than I had ever seen him before. He was holding his original recipe journal from when he initially opened the restaurant, a battered leather-bound book. Your grandmother was the only person who encouraged me to open the restaurant, he replied softly. My father wished for me to pursue a career in law. Cooking, he claimed, was beneath our family. He set the cookbook down on my desk. Didn't I become just like him? I'm trying to make my kids live the life I believe they ought to have. 80% of their vegetables and herbs now come from a rooftop garden project that started with the rehabilitation of their herb garden. There were months on the waiting list for tables with a garden view. The restaurant's Instagram following exploded with pictures of the vertical gardens, and food experts complimented the harmony between farm to table. At a recent business meeting, even Mike had to admit the difference. Indeed, they were now required to set up formal meetings with me. Gritting his teeth, he acknowledged that their earnings had gone up 40% since the garden makeover. After her mother hired me as the official landscape architect for their country club restoration, Amanda's attitude drastically changed. All of a sudden, she was telling everyone how she had always sensed that her sister-in-law's relationship with nature was unique. Last week, everything came together. The success of our urban revitalization initiative impressed the city's sustainability board, which suggested a significant extension. My father's restaurant was to be the focal point of a green corridor that would link a number of nearby businesses. The catch? The restaurant would have to create a display garden out of the remaining parking space. In addition to promising to highlight the restaurant in their tourism promotions, the city provided significant tax benefits. This time, instead of calling a meal where everyone chatted over me, my father arranged an emergency family meeting. I sat at the head of the table in the restaurant's private dining room for the first time. "We need your help," he remarked in a meaningful voice. Not only as an advisor, as a collaborator. They made an unexpected suggestion. They intended to establish a joint venture that would incorporate the restaurant and my design studio into a horticulture and culinary experience center. In order to incorporate my professional name, my father even proposed changing it. The financial estimates were provided by Mike, who appeared to have bitten into a lemon. It was difficult to ignore the numbers. Even he had to acknowledge that my hobby of gardening had become a lucrative business venture. Mom produced a long-forgotten old picture of me at age 6, displaying my first tomato plant in Grandma Rose's garden with pride. "We ought to have witnessed it back then," she remarked quietly. "A corporate office was never the right place for you. The businesses are now integrating. An exquisite herb leaf design may be found in the restaurant's new logo. Each meal on the menu identifies the precise garden location of its ingredients, and the menu proudly states, 'From our garden to your table.'" Our project was featured in a national magazine's list of the top 10 innovative family businesses last week. When they especially commended the second-generation restaurateur family for embracing their daughter's goal to transform urban dining, the irony was not lost on anyone. It all began in Grandma Rose's garden, which is now a sustainable urban agriculture education center. We are collaborating with nearby schools to offer educational programs, and the waiting list for workshops is months long. The most unexpected thing? Before the restaurant opens, Dad now spends his mornings in the garden. He was wearing one of our branded garden aprons when I recently saw him diligently caring for the herbs. He appeared calmer than I had seen him in a long time. At family get-togethers, people used to make fun of me as the gardener. Do you recall that? "Welcome to the garden table, where the gardener's vision meets culinary excellence," the host now says to patrons. I was moved to tears by a letter I received yesterday. A high school student who had participated in one of our gardening classes sent it to us. She wrote about how she was motivated to defy her parents, who wanted her to pursue a career in medicine, after seeing my tale in the documentary. Her love was environmental science. A sketch of a garden idea she came up with was included in the letter. It looked a lot like my early sketches from Grandma Rose's journals. In an effort to start our first kid mentorship program, I've extended an invitation to her to work as an intern this summer. I've learned a lot about family legacies from this entire ordeal. It's not always necessary to follow the route your ancestors paved. Sometimes, honoring their heritage means broadening it to encompass new opportunities. My father constructed a restaurant that served delicious meals and united people. In order to nourish not just their bodies but also their souls. I added gardens that help children feel more connected to the earth. I want to express my gratitude to everyone on Reddit who helped me along the way. When my own family failed to recognize my value, your support kept me going. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who shared similar experiences of pursuing their aspirations in spite of family resistance. You made me understand I wasn't the only one. Stay on course if you're having similar difficulties. Occasionally, the same thing your family makes fun of turns out to be the secret to changing both your and their lives. My parents skipped my wedding for my brother. Now their world is falling apart as the truth unravels. My parents put my brother first once more, and now their world is falling apart. So I only disclosed my wedding after it had already taken place. Mike, 21 million, is the younger brother of me, 27 female. He is the epitome of a mama's boy and a man-child, always whining and demanding respect from others. My parents have worried about him ever since he was born. He did not have a difficult birth and does not have special needs. My parents totally abandoned me when he was just born. In particular, my mother EIEF, changed from being a devoted mother to one of those boy moms that people make fun of online. Even though my father, 50 million, still loved and supported me, he has always been too cowardly to challenge my mother and let me win, not even once. Only my 76-year-old grandfather defended me. He never liked my siblings and often criticized my parents for their actions. He claims that we have a really particular link and that I make him think of his late wife, my grandma. I don't get to see him very frequently because he lives on the opposite side of the nation. Mike enjoys making fun of me since he knows our mother likes him. We've always been at odds because of this and his general conduct. He's a brat, pampered, and a terrible person. I can't even remember how many times I've been in trouble for stuff he framed me for or for performing things better than him. He received a scholarship to a prestigious out-of-state institution because football is his only talent. My parents said my college fund had been spent to pay for bills following a fire, so they didn't spend a single penny on my schooling. I found out years later that Mike had really received money to purchase a house and a car. Lucas and I met at my public university. There, he was the first person with whom I really clicked. I met new friends, of course, and they are now my closest pals. I was able to leave my parents' place because of them and Lucas, who had been my best friend for years before we started dating. Lucas and I are now both highly respected in our professions and make excellent money. The principal problem: a year ago, Lucas asked me to marry him. We didn't make a big deal out of it or broadcast it on social media since we're pretty private. My folks simply said, "That's nice," when I informed them, and I'm beginning to believe they didn't even hear me. With our closest friends and family, we chose a modest yet elegant ceremony and reception. Lucas persuaded me to extend an invitation to my brother and parents, but they never did. Every time I went to visit, my mother would interrupt me and begin discussing my brother's achievements and exploits, without indicating that it was a wedding. I'd had enough at one point. I cut her off and explained that I had an event scheduled for a certain day that couldn't be changed. She informed me that they were unable to go since they had to be there for my brother's final game of the season. Naturally, I was not surprised by this obvious preference. For identical reasons, they had missed my high school and university graduations as well as my ballet recitals. I chose to be petty at that moment. I didn't press my parents to attend the event after telling them it was okay for them to do so. I purposely omitted the fact that this event was actually my wedding. Advanced flash. I got married a couple of weeks ago. It was ideal. We had a great time with my family, Lucas's family, and our friends present. Everything went perfectly, and my grandpa was overjoyed to give me away. When several of my relatives questioned me about why my parents weren't present, I answered honestly that they couldn't since they had to go to my brother's game. Nothing out of the ordinary happened, though I did get a few glares for it, and my grandfather was noticeably upset for a bit. Lucas and I left for our honeymoon after the celebration, and we didn't use our phones at all. But upon our return, we encountered a storm, both real and imagined. My phone was flooded with alerts when I turned it back on. The majority came from my brother and mother. Because one of my paternal aunts had shared wedding pictures on Facebook with a barely veiled jab at my parents, particularly my mother, for missing the wedding, Mike called me a variety of derogatory things. My parents received criticism from the public for their treatment of me when the post went viral in their neighborhood. As it happens, my grandfather came to visit my parents in person to deliver a harsh lecture, humiliating my father, his son, to the point of tears. This appeared to be the tipping moment for my father. He eventually rebelled against my mom, threatening to file for divorce unless she made amends, because he was so upset about missing his only daughter's wedding and getting his father's displeasure. My mom has been bombarding my phone with messages, and it looks like this is the reason. The letters began as threats and insults but soon evolved into pleading for forgiveness and throwing sympathy parties. Right now, my spouse and I are at home debating how to respond to the circumstance. Many of my family members have apologized for what I went through, including those I didn't invite to the wedding. They say they were unaware that this was taking place at home. Since most of them reside in separate states or on the opposite side of the nation from my grandfather, I can't hold them responsible. My mom's sisters and friends, however, have been making fun of me for not telling her about the wedding directly. They maintain that she is upset over missing it. I'm not positive, but I believe she's just trying to save face. My parents' most recent communications appear to be quite sad and regretful that they were unable to attend my wedding. My family is now split into 3 groups: the majority, who support me, my maternal aunts, who shame me for allegedly offending my mother, and my maternal grandparents, who demand that I pardon my mother because she has made an effort to make amends. My closest pals are telling me not to pay attention to them. Edit, answering frequently asked questions: did I tell my parents I was getting married? Indeed, I did. All of my guests received conventional paper invitations, and I was informed that they had all arrived. Mike, my parents, some distant relatives, and some Lucas family members didn't reply. I sent follow-up mails to verify that I was there. Those who did not respond informed me that they were unable to attend. I texted my brother and mom to ask, but they ignored me. I didn't bother pressing further because I was aware of their past and had everything planned. Why didn't I reschedule the wedding? I was dismissed each time I pushed on emphasizing my celebrations to get an answer because I had already been informed that there was my brother's game. It seemed that some things were just more essential than me, therefore I was frequently told it wasn't important and to quit being pissy and bothersome. It wasn't worth the effort, so I think it's fair that I quit pressing at this point. To see if my parents would even be interested, I refrained from informing them outright that I was getting married. Naturally, they didn't. I talked candidly about my wedding with my aunts and uncles in spite of this. Several times when I spoke with my aunt about venues or clothing stores, my mother was in the room. She was talking to people or on the phone at different moments. She was never attentive. She would smile, say, "That's great, dear," and then move on whenever I brought it up during reunions. Dad and Mike were silent on the radio. I had previously experienced harassment whenever I attempted to go no contact, NC. They never went to my high school, bachelor's, or master's graduations because of things involving my brother, and I was humiliated for having the audacity to abandon my family. This was passed down from my maternal aunts and grandparents in addition to my parents and brother. Lucas was the pivotal moment. Shortly after my previous attempt at going NC, we began dating, and with his encouragement, I now feel more secure in my position. I wasn't as confident in myself before then. I attempted to inform my paternal family about my parents' treatment when I was 14 years old. My parents pretended to be apologetic while my aunts, uncles, and grandfather chastised them. After we arrived home, I was subjected to lifelong gaslighting and beatings for lying. I continued to communicate with my paternal side but, out of fear, kept the abuse a secret. My grandpa was the only one who knew, but he was constantly warned that if he attempted to step in, he would lose my favor. My parents don't know my new address, and I reside an hour away from their little town. This is deliberate. My mother supported my brother's attempt to break into my former apartment to steal money, saying, "Siblings share their goods." I've since relocated, and I'll make sure they never find out where I live. My college funds were not immediately spent by my parents. After lying about needing it for costs, they used it to purchase a house close to my brother's college when he started his freshman year and a car for his 16th birthday. Until it met their needs, they did not touch the fund. I want to start by saying thank you to everyone who read my story and wished my husband and I luck. I am so appreciative of your encouraging words, affection, and criticism. The response has exceeded my expectations by a wide margin. To people who think my tale isn't true, I'm glad your family life is better than mine, even if you consider my reality to be a fantasy. But I would really appreciate it if you would quit teasing me and DMing me to say that I'm fabricating a tale to get attention. If I missed anything in the first post, it was because I was so distraught and crying over the abuse I was experiencing from my family. Keeping a modicum of civility would be appreciated, but you are not obligated to read or believe my narrative. It was obvious from the invitation that it was a wedding. There are no justifications for ignorance. The wedding was not attended by my maternal side of the family. While some sent gifts but chose not to attend, the majority were busy. I'm not sure why they didn't talk to my mother about my wedding. I'm not like I live in their heads. My mother essentially apologized by SMS as part of her purported atonement. This past week has been a little chaotic. I took a few days off from Reddit to collect my thoughts. After that, Lucas and I talked for a long time about what to do. I don't think I could ever love him more than I do now since he has been my rock. Although talking about my parents was never acceptable to me, Lucas gave me a harsh reality check that I really needed. We came to the conclusion that it wasn't healthy for me to stay in touch, stick around, and not go no contact, NC. I came to the realization that I never really went NC because deep down, I still needed their approval. I know it's pathetic, but it's like a drug. My parents can be warm, hilarious, loving, and caring when we're together, until they're not. You want their praise so badly that you ruin yourself because of the little affection they offer you, which makes you need more. However, that is sufficient. I made a self-promise that things would change. After giving it some thought, I made the decision to go NC with everyone who made a fuss out of this situation and to begin therapy, for good this time. I messaged my father after thinking about it for days, telling him that I would meet him, Mom, and Mike somewhere neutral if he wanted to chat. He agreed right away. We met at the park the following day. We were joined in repairing the damage by my father's siblings and sisters. It appeared as though my father had been crying for some time. My mother appeared the same, but it appeared to be more embarrassed and angry. My sibling appeared irritated. I explained to them how I had always been harmed by their acts and preference for my brother, and how their abusive behavior had led me to conclude that I did not want to speak to any of them ever again. My mother made several attempts to interrupt me during the meeting, but my aunt, who made the Facebook post, always stopped her. They had no genuine response when I questioned why they were treating me in this manner. My uncle chastised my dad for constantly sobbing and apologizing without providing an explanation. My mother finally acknowledged, "I just didn't like you." As though she were asking herself that question for the first time. Simple enough. My brother? He acknowledged that it was like a sport to him to get attention and make me miserable. I asked more questions. They said they never received my invitation when I questioned why they never replied. They denied ever seeing the texts when I presented them. As it happens, they were speaking the truth. My folks weren't home when they received the wedding invitation. When my brother saw the invitation, he tore it up and threw it away when he was there for the weekend. My parents erased my texts after I sent them. He said it was simple because he had archived my chat so they wouldn't receive any notices. I was upset. I had to stop Lucas from striking Mike in the face when I asked him why he would do such a thing. He shrugged and said, it wasn't as important as the stuff we had planned. Oddly enough, my folks were furious and started berating Mike. In response, he threw a fit and started crying like a crocodile. To be honest, I was grimly satisfied as I saw it happen. My mother then made an attempt to brush things off, saying that everything had been worked out and that there was no need to fuss over a miscommunication. She went so far as to say that I should clear their identity. That irritated me. I cut her off and informed her that they were not at all forgiven. Their years of negligence were not undone by Mike's disdain for the invitation. In addition, they ought to have inquired about my wedding, which had been clear. Are you curious about my mother's reaction? She sincerely believed Lucas didn't like me and would never marry me, saying, I did hear you talking about a wedding of yours, but I just thought you were being delusional and seeking my attention with exaggerated scenarios. Believe me when I say that I was on the verge of losing my patience. Additionally, it was discovered that my brother didn't even have a football game to go to. In order to dodge my event, my parents made up a tale about how my husband, friends and I don't know much about football, we prefer soccer, and how I stopped asking about it when Mike made fun of me in high school. Since Lucas and I are blocked on social media and my brother has private accounts, I was unable to verify or deny the existence of a game at the time I made the original post. I foolishly believed what my parents said. But no. Do you want to know where the man-child actually went? Mike wanted to go to Disneyland, so they did. My brother's 100th tantrum vacation was covered by the football news. They had apparently done this several times in the previous months. The sheer volume of material I had discovered at that time left me exhausted and overwhelmed. I lost my temper when I realized how horribly I had been duped. I got up and told my father that he was a weak, depressed man who couldn't defend his child without his wife's consent. I informed my brother that he was a worthless justification for a guy who would never achieve anything in his life and would always live like the useless leech that he is. I told my mother that she was the worst narcissist and that she was a worthless little woman who was so irrelevant that she didn't even merit attention or condemnation. I went on to say that she was too rotten for even God to save. I understand. Harsh. Halfway through my tirade, my mother jumped up from her chair to yell at me, but I was too angry. She became so enraged that it appeared as though steam was escaping from her ears when I yelled at her to shut up, sit down, and listen for once. After that, all I can recall is that I continued to babble non-stop. All of my hurt and rage seemed to pour forth. I believe the park as a whole fell silent at one point. I told Mike and my parents that I was disowning them all and that if they were wise, they would never contact me again. My brother and parents were left to the mercy of my aunts and uncles as I snatched up my pocketbook and departed with Lucas, Anna and Francis. I eventually had a panic attack on the drive home once the reality of what I had just heard and learned hit me. Anna helped me navigate it while Lucas was driving till we pulled into a parking area so I could relax. I am incredibly appreciative of their assistance. I threw myself onto the bed as soon as I got home and fell asleep. I really wanted to do what you said and share the entire discussion on Facebook, but I couldn't do it because of my job and profession. Sharing my tale anonymously on Reddit is one thing, posting my identity and face all over Facebook is quite another. That was not a route I could take. I did something better instead. I gave the woman in charge of my mom's church a folder that contained all of my mother's derogatory messages and terrible remarks. My mom put a lot of effort into joining this close-knit society, but it's also really critical. It is a social death sentence to be rejected by them. Indeed, that is precisely what took place. Like clockwork, the scandal quickly swept through the little community, spreading beyond the church. You can only imagine my parents' reactions to this. I discovered further texts from my maternal side of the family ridiculing me further for upsetting and disrespecting their sister or daughter as a result of my small deed. I took your counsel at that moment and informed my family that they would no longer be involved in my life going forward. They might talk all they wanted, I made plain, but I wouldn't give a damn. Rather, they ought to be appreciative that I spared their spouses and employers from their offensive texts. I blocked all of them on everything, including the grandparents. I discovered a long note from my dad. He acknowledged that everything I had stated was accurate, expressed regret for not having the courage to confront my mother, and acknowledged that he was amazed at how much of my life he had lost as a result of her. He informed me that he was sick of being controlled and intended to file for divorce from her regardless of my choice. In addition, he said he wanted to get close to me in order to make up for the years we had missed. I responded to him by saying that I didn't want to see or forgive him just now. He replied that he loved me and would do all in his power to win me back. After responding that I didn't think that was credible, I blocked him as well. To be honest, his sleazy attempt to get out of the problem by blaming my mother was pitiful. At least she admitted to being cruel. However, he was limited to blaming others for his decisions. People like that are not what I want in my life. Along with the remainder of my maternal side, my mother and brother were barred. I blocked Mike as well since he continued to mock and disrespect me in his communications. My mother organized a self-pity party since she was rejected by her community and her marriage was failing. I said, "Good riddance?" And then I blocked her as well. In order to help me, my grandfather chose to remain with us for a bit. He really is the greatest. Even though he won't acknowledge it, I can see that he is flattered by some of your remarks that he has read. A few days have gone by since, and nothing has happened. Lucas has been treating me like royalty, and I'm about to begin therapy. This is it, even though I know it's not the revenge-fueled, drama-filled update you were hoping for. If anything changes or develops, I'll keep you informed. I sincerely appreciate all of your love and support. Second story. The robot mop and the freeloading brother. Even though he never bought mop pads or utilized our robot mop, my freeloading brother stole it during one of his surreptitious trips. 7 years ago, my brother Chris, 27M, fictitious name, moved in with my boyfriend, 28M, and me, 26F. When he was sleeping in his car after being expelled from our childhood home due to drug addiction, we felt sorry for him. Chris and my boyfriend got along well at first. However, after a few years of cohabitation, Chris becomes withdrawn and aloof. I had to clean up after him while putting up with his pessimistic attitude after he quit completing chores. I informed Chris that he needed to locate another somewhere to live 6 months before the expiration of our contract. I believed we had decided to divide up the joint appliances and belongings when he finally moved out a few weeks before the lease expired. We didn't talk about our common robot mop, though. My grandmother offered it to the three of us when we were at her house years ago because she was no longer using it. Chris never helped maintain the little robot, even after we took it home. The mop was a simple gadget that you filled with cleaning solution and used with disposable mop pads. Chris, however, never switched it on or purchased new mop pads during the 4 years we owned it. My boyfriend or I were always in charge of it. We would all wake up to clean floors downstairs since I divided the cost of the mop pads and programmed the robot to run every night. Chris had been slowly transferring his belongings out for more than a month, so he hadn't returned his key. He would always arrive unexpectedly to collect boxes and personal items. At times, when we were out, we were unaware that he had been there. After giving it some thought and gathering many viewpoints, I sent Chris the following message. After giving it some thinking, I don't think the robot is yours. To help us get it home, I would love it if you could bring it to Thanksgiving. Over the years you've lived with us, we've been quite understanding, so stealing a shared appliance without asking is not only rude, but it also betrays a lack of regard for us. After years of utilizing and maintaining our robot without your assistance, we would like it returned because it belongs to us. Chris answered. Go ahead and bring that over when you get a moment. I've considered it too and I also want Grandma's TV. Thank you. I answered. Additionally, the TV was given to us especially. Why you believe that to be yours as well is beyond me. Chris retorted. Apparently, I was handed everything. While I was in the kitchen, she asked if I wanted the robot, and I replied that I did. That was the course of events. The narrative is over. What you believe to be yours or not doesn't matter to me. It doesn't become yours just because I let you borrow something because I'm not using it. I retorted, we were all present when she made the proposition, as I recall. She insisted that it was a shared household item for all of us, even though I attempted to refuse because it was still functional. Before taking it while we were out, you ought to have spoken with us if you believed it to be yours. Chris answered. You don't recall correctly. I don't need to talk about my own belongings. In addition, my boyfriend was acting shadily by removing items from the tent while I was away in the hopes that I wouldn't notice. LOL. What's different about that? Since I've grown up and don't give a damn anymore, I didn't bring it up. I want to move on from this awful chapter of my life, and if you don't, I'll do the same to you. That's when I informed him, we believed our conversation with BF about dividing up things we had in common went well. You're acting immaturely, and I don't want someone in my life who can't have a basic discussion about things we have in common. Well, I suppose that's it. It appears that our little pal won't be returning. I provided an update a few days later. I wanted to express my gratitude to everyone who left a remark on my previous post. I read all of the comments and took into account all of the viewpoints. I felt empowered by your counsel to advocate for myself and demand the return of the robot. I mentioned my text exchange with Chris in my previous post's comments. In summary, I explained why the robot belonged to us and politely requested its return. Chris basically threatened to take me out of his life if I continued to bring it up since he couldn't see reason. My amazing boyfriend could no longer stand by and watch Chris treat us badly. For privacy considerations, I won't reveal the details of his private talk with Chris. But, following your advice, BF threatened to tell the family precise details if the robot wasn't returned by Thanksgiving. Chris had a week to decide as a result. I was getting ready to blow everyone away at family dinner after a calm week. On Wednesday night, however, I discovered a box on my front step as I walked outside to warm up my car. When I picked it up, I discovered it wasn't sealed, and I hadn't placed any orders. Our robot pal made it home. Guys! Chris must have determined that a mopping robot wasn't worth damaging his family's opinion of him. We want to maintain low or no contact moving ahead, and he will no longer be troubling us. Positively, BF and I have been checking on our pets with our new home monitoring cameras. It has made us very happy to watch our dogs and cats while we are alone at home. I'll leave a remark with a family photo of the robot and the pets. I appreciate your support, everyone. Mom moved her friend and kids into my room, so I left to pay the bills at home, and now she's begging me to come back. Although living at home at the age of 23 wasn't exactly what I had planned for my life, it worked out for the most part. I wasn't simply lounging around playing video games and eating snacks. I was paying my rent, my mom's phone bill, and my power bill. I had my own place, home-cooked meals, and was able to concentrate on my freelance job without having to worry about large bills. I had even converted my room into a small studio for my content creation gigs, which I hoped would gain popularity soon. All in all, the arrangement was very fantastic. Everything was good until Kelly, my mom's best friend, moved in with her 2 children. I wasn't happy about it, but I could understand why. Kelly was going through a difficult divorce, and her husband was a total jerk, according to my mom, so they needed a place to stay, and our house was the best choice. They stayed in the guest room at first, and it wasn't a big deal. Sure, the kids were a little noisy, but I just closed my door and put on my headphones. I assumed it would only be temporary, only a few weeks until Kelly got back on her feet. I assumed that was the arrangement and didn't think much about it, but that quickly changed. The guest room wasn't very large, but it was sufficient for Kelly and her children to stay in for a time. I couldn't believe what I saw when I walked in one day after running some errands and saw something strange right away. My door was open and I could hear children laughing inside. My studio setup, including my pricey microphone, lighting, and camera, was pushed into a corner as if it didn't matter. Kelly's kids were running around like they owned the place. My desk chair was shifted, my bed was covered in toys, and one of the kids was on my computer. I was so shocked that I probably screamed, "What the hell is going on?" louder than I should have. "Calm your tits," my mother replied. "It's not a big deal. The kids needed more space, and your room is the biggest? It's only fair." My mother walked in and began berating me as if I was the one who was out of line. Fair? The room for which I was paying rent? She dismissed me as though I were being silly when I informed her that I wanted them out of my room right away, saying, "You're being selfish. They need to be comfortable." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't about comfort, it was about respect. My room wasn't just a place to sleep, it was a place where I worked. I had spent more than $3,000 on my studio setup, so I couldn't just put it in a corner and forget about it. My mother was not amenable to my explanations, saying, "They're just kids, they want to play on your computer, stop making such a fuss." I quickly put an end to that notion, saying, "They are not touching my equipment in any way, and if they do, I'm in serious trouble." Kelly then said, "Oh, come on. They're just curious, and you can't blame them. Maybe if you weren't so stiff, they'd listen to you." I was shocked. I wasn't uptight, I was just trying to protect the things I had worked so hard to acquire. I told Kelly bluntly that her children couldn't touch my belongings and that I would hold her accountable if they did. Kelly called me selfish, and my mother agreed. All of a sudden, I was the villain in my own house. The home became uncomfortable after that initial outburst, and I was shocked that my mom and Kelly were against me, especially because I was the one who was paying the rent. However, I assumed that after they calmed down, they would see how absurd this was. I tried to talk to my mom again the following day, explaining how important my studio equipment was to me both financially and professionally. Freelancing isn't just a pastime, it's my job, and I couldn't function without it, and it would take months or maybe years to replace it. I'm not trying to be rude, but this is unfair, Mom. You gave it away without even asking me, and I'm paying the rent for that room. You're being dramatic. It's my house, and I decide what happens in it, she retorted. Your house? I pay rent. I'm contributing here, not just squatting for free, I exclaimed in shock. The kids need space. Your brother's room is too small, and your sister's room is full of her things. Besides, your room has all that fancy stuff, and they like it better. She shrugged as if it didn't matter. My sister's room was nearly as large as mine, and to be honest, she hardly used it because she was always out with her friends, but my mother wouldn't even entertain the possibility that my siblings, both of whom were 15, had perfectly good rooms. My brother's was smaller, but it was still large enough for 2 children. She claimed that the kids adore your room since it is cooler and that all of your glitzy devices add to their enjoyment. Fun? This wasn't about having fun. My room served as a place where I lived, worked, and unwinded, not as a play area for Kelly's children. What, are you going to replace anything if they break it? Because I can't afford to, I asked her. Oh, stop being so paranoid. They're kids, not monsters. If you just let them play, they'd probably leave your stuff alone, Kelly added at that point. Letting them play on my $3,000 setup? Are you serious? No way, I yelled. You're being selfish. This is a difficult time for us, and you're making it all about you, said Kelly, rolling her eyes. When I finally had enough, I turned to my mother and told her, I have to move my stuff out if they're staying in my room. I can't risk them damaging it. Where are you going to put it? There's no space anywhere else, she asked, laughing, really laughing. I raised my voice and said, so I'm just supposed to let them trash my stuff? How is that fair? Life is unfair. You're an adult, you should be able to handle a little inconvenience, my mother said, shaking her head. A minor annoyance? No, it was disrespectful to be evicted from my own room. I had paid rent for that space, and now I was not only unable to use it, but I was also prohibited from entering my room, which my mother claimed was their space now, and that I had no right to enter. I spent the next few days attempting to avoid being at home as much as possible, hanging out at coffee shops, and working on my laptop, but it wasn't the same without my studio setup. I was falling behind on deadlines, my productivity plummeted, and my stress levels were through the sky. Look, I replied. I'll work out a deal. Let me move my setup into the guest room and they stay in my room. That way, I can continue working and they can have the space they need. This was my final attempt to talk sense into my mother's head. No, you'll just have to wait until Kelly gets back on her feet. The guest room is too small for all your stuff, she said without even considering it. How long will that take? I questioned impatiently. As long as it takes, she shrugged, adding, you don't get to set deadlines for other people's struggles. I wanted to help Kelly and her children because I knew they were going through a difficult time, but this wasn't helping, it was enabling. Kelly wasn't paying anything to stay with us, and now I was essentially being forced out of my own life to make room for them. I couldn't believe this was happening. I heard Kelly moaning about me later that night in the kitchen, calling me immature and selfish, saying, he doesn't even understand how hard this is for us. He's just being a brat. He's always been stubborn. He'll get over it, my mother concurred. That was the last straw. I knew they didn't give a damn about me or my predicament. I was simply a paycheck to my mom and a barrier to Kelly and her children. They wouldn't listen, and they wouldn't change. Despite the odd turmoil, I loved living at home, it was affordable, and I got along with my brothers. However, I couldn't continue to live somewhere where I wasn't appreciated, so I started looking for rooms to rent the following day. After feeling like a stranger in my own house for days, I finally had enough and realized that respect was more important than the room anymore. I was trying to establish a future for myself, pay my bills, and pay my rent, but neither my mom nor Kelly seemed to care. They had decided that my needs came first, and I was sick of it. I thought that if I could show my mom how serious I was, she would finally listen. One evening, when it was just the two of us and my siblings were upstairs and Kelly was putting her kids to bed, I sat my mom down in the living room. Mom, I said calmly at the beginning, we need to talk. She looked at me wearily and said, what now? I said, I can't continue to live this way. You gave it away without asking, and it's unfair. I've been paying rent for that room, and now I can't even use it. We've been through this. It's temporary. Kelly and the kids are going through a hard time. You're young, and you can adapt, she said, leaning back on the couch with a sigh. You didn't ask me, you just decided that my room wasn't mine anymore, and now I can't even work since everything I own is packed up or pushed into a corner. That's not the point, I shot back. It's about respect, not about adjusting. She waved me away and remarked, "You're being dramatic. This is my house, and I get to decide what happens in it." It seemed like a slap in the face each time she uttered that line. I remarked, "If this is your house, then why am I paying rent? Perhaps I shouldn't be paying anything at all if you're going to treat me like a guest." "Don't you dare pull that. You know I need your help with the bills," she said, her eyes narrowing. I yelled, "That's not how this works. You can't take my money every month and then turn around and say I have no say. Then treat me like I matter. What do you want me to do? Throw Kelly and her kids out on the street?" "They have nowhere else to go," she said, giving me a crazy eyes look. But there are other options. They could move into one of my siblings' rooms or stay in the guest room. Hell, you could even rotate rooms so everyone takes turns sharing the space. But taking my room and locking me out? That's not okay, I said, shaking my head. "Your room was the best option," my mother said, crossing her arms. "Your brother and sister are too young to share their rooms, and the guest room is too small for 3 people. "No," I shot back. "It was the simplest solution. You dumped it on me because you didn't want to handle the hassle." The last word. "I'll make this simple," I said, staring her in the eye. "Either Kelly and the kids move out of my room, or I move out of the house. Those are your options." My irritation bubbled over at that moment. Surprised, she blinked. "Don't be crazy. Where would you even go?" she said. I informed her, "If you don't respect me or the fact that I'm paying to live here, then I'll find somewhere else to live." I had already begun looking for rooms to rent. "You're bluffing, you can't afford to move out," she sneered. "Try me," I said, leaning back and crossing my arms. My mom didn't take me seriously, which only strengthened my resolve, so I spent every free moment looking through rental listings, messaging landlords, and figuring out my budget. It wasn't going to be easy, but I knew I could make it work if I cut back on non-essentials. The next few days were stressful. I didn't bring up the ultimatum again, but it hung in the air like a storm cloud. At home, however, things deteriorated. Kelly's children had transformed my room into their own playground, and I was not even permitted to enter without someone yelling. One day, I attempted to get some books and a set of headphones that I had left behind, but Kelly stopped me. With her fists on her hips, she stood in the doorway and demanded, "What are you doing in here?" I tried to seem calm as I said, "I need my stuff." "This is their room now, so you can't just walk in whenever you want," she said, shaking her head. I was dumbfounded as I looked at her and said, "Are you serious? This is my room." "Not anymore," she stated in a cold tone. "You have to respect their personal space." With clenched teeth I answered, "I'm paying rent for this room, so I'll gather my belongings and go, but don't tell me to respect their space when no one respects mine." The irony almost made me giggle. My mom wasn't going to support me, and Kelly wasn't going to change, so I knew that if I wanted things to improve, I would have to take matters into my own hands. She muttered something under her breath and left, but the damage was already done. Relocating the landlord was friendly, the room was clean enough, and most importantly, I could set up my studio without worrying about kids touching my equipment. I found a room for rent a week after the ultimatum, which was within my budget. It was a small space in an older building, but it was mine. When I signed the lease, I felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness because I had to put myself first, even if it meant leaving behind the house I'd grown up in. I didn't tell my mom right away because I wanted to make sure everything was finalized before I dropped the bombshell. After I signed the lease for my new place, I knew I had to act quickly because if I gave my mom too much notice, she would find a way to make the move even more difficult. I carefully planned it out and told a few close friends about it, and 2 of them agreed to help me pack and move my belongings. One of them even offered to record everything on their phone, just in case things got ugly. I knew it would be difficult, especially with my mom and Kelly breathing down my neck, but I didn't care anymore. I wanted to give my mom one last chance to make amends, so I sat down with her the night before the move. "Mom," I began calmly. "I'm moving out tomorrow and I found a place to rent." Startled, she raised her head from her phone and said, "You're really doing this?" "Yes," I replied, nodding. "You didn't give me a lot of options." "You're overreacting. This whole thing is temporary." "You're leaving over nothing," she said, rolling her eyes. I firmly stated, "It's not nothing. You treated me like a disposable object, gave away my room, locked me out, and told me I had no say in the matter. You know I need your rent money to keep this house running. If you leave, how am I supposed to pay the bills?" She groaned as if I were wearing her out. You made it obvious that this isn't my house. You stated that it's your house, your rules. Well, if that's the case, then I don't have to stay here, I answered, pushing off a twinge of remorse. So you're just going to leave us high and dry? She glared at me. I shrugged and said, I don't owe you anything. You can ask Kelly, or her husband, since they're still married, to start paying the rent. I decided to leave after she gave me a chilly glance and returned to her phone without saying anything else. My friends arrived early the following day with a rented van and a few cars, and we were prepared to finish everything as soon as possible. I had previously packed the majority of my belongings into boxes, but I still needed to move my studio setup out of my old room. The kids were running around the living room, and Kelly was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee when we arrived at the house. She looked at me suspiciously as soon as I entered. She narrowed her eyes and questioned, "What's going on?" "I'm leaving," I said plainly. "Really? You're leaving because of this?" "That's pathetic," she said, raising her eyebrows. Ignoring her, I went upstairs to my room, or what had been my room, and when I opened the door, I was nearly sickened by what I saw. My desk was cluttered with random items, my computer, microphone, and camera were crammed into a corner, and they appeared to have been neglected for weeks. "Start recording," I said, turning to one of my buddies. As I gently started packing away my equipment, he took out his phone and started shooting, and Kelly must have recognized what was going on because she walked upstairs and began to yell. "This is their room now, so you can't just walk in here and start taking stuff," she yelled. "It's my stuff, Kelly. I paid for it, and I'm taking it with me," I said, turning to face her while maintaining my composure. "You're being ridiculous. You're throwing a tantrum over a couple of kids needing space," she said, crossing her arms. "This isn't a tantrum," I responded steadily. "This is me defending myself. You and my mother have treated me as though I'm unimportant, and I'm over it." My mom came upstairs to see what was going on, and when she saw the empty room, she flipped out. She started screaming again, but I ignored her and continued packing, and my friends helped me load everything into the van while one of them continued to film, in case Kelly or my mom tried to pull something. She said, her voice trembling with rage, "You're really leaving us just because you didn't get your way?" I gave her a direct look and said, "I'm leaving because you didn't respect me. You made it clear that I'm not a priority here, so I'm making myself a priority. I paid rent for this room, and you gave it away without even asking." "Don't, I've made my decision," I said, holding up a hand as she opened her lips to disagree. Kelly stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, gazing at me as I carried the last box out to the van. "Good luck out there," she murmured cynically, "because when things get tough, you'll realize how selfish you've been." I simply got into the van and drove off with my companions without even bothering to answer. My mom was outraged and accused me of being selfish and thoughtless for leaving her in a difficult situation, saying that I was quitting the family and leaving her to handle the bills alone. That night, after I had moved into my new house and begun unpacking, my phone exploded with texts from her. One text said, "I can't believe you'd do this to me after everything I've done for you. You've always been so selfish." She had made her decisions, and now I was making mine, so I typed up a response but erased it since I didn't owe her an explanation. As soon as I moved into my new home, I was relieved that there would be no more arguments, disrespect, or, most importantly, that I didn't matter. My new room was smaller, and the building wasn't exactly the best, but it was quiet, and it was mine. I started by unpacking my studio gear and carefully arranging it in my room's corner. I felt like I could finally breathe for the first time in weeks. However, the tranquility was short-lived. Trips of guilt. The following morning, my mom began bombarding my phone with messages, asking whether I had paid the rent for the month. When I told her that I wasn't paying because I had moved out, she became furious. She texted, "You owe me for the remainder of this month, and you haven't even reached the 25th yet." I rolled my eyes and said, "No, I don't. You can ask Kelly to pay the rent because I'm not living there anymore. Kelly doesn't have money to pay rent, you know that. You're leaving me to handle everything on my own, and I can't afford it," she said almost immediately. I replied by text, "That's not my problem. You stated clearly that it's your house and your rules. Now it's your bills and your responsibility." That response infuriated her, and she began accusing me of being ungrateful, selfish, and immature, saying that my departure was tearing the family apart. Initially, the guilt began to seep in, but I reminded myself of why I had left in the first place. My mom had treated me like a throwaway object, so why should I feel guilty about prioritizing myself? I had always contributed financially, and I knew my efforts had made a significant impact. My mom sent me lengthy, meandering texts about how I was ruining things the following week, and the guilt trips escalated into fury. Everyone in the family is asking why you left, and I don't know what to tell them. One text said, "It was amazing how much better I felt without all the chaos and negativity weighing me down, so I didn't bother responding because I knew that anything I said would only make things worse. Instead, I concentrated on getting settled in my new home, catching up on work, and getting my studio back up and running." My sister contacted me unexpectedly a few days later, and since I hadn't heard from her since I moved out, I assumed she wanted to check in. However, as soon as I answered, I knew she had other plans. She skipped the small conversation and exclaimed, "Mom is really upset. She says you're not paying rent this month, and now she's freaking out about the bills." I said calmly, "I'm not living there anymore. Why should I pay rent for a place I'm not living in?" My sister countered, "But you know she can't afford it without you. Why stop now? You've always helped out." I told her straight out. Because she didn't respect me. She gave away my room, locked me out, and treated me like I didn't matter. I'm enough of being taken advantage of. It's not that easy. Mom is just trying to help, and Kelly is going through a lot, my sister groaned. I replied, "I understand that, but why does assisting Kelly mean that I'm being taken advantage of? I paid the rent for that room, so I had every right to keep it." My sister added pathetically, "She's just stressed out and didn't mean to screw you over." I retorted, "So am I, but nobody gave a damn when I was being forced out of my own room." I could tell she was stuck in the middle, but I wasn't going to allow her shame me into changing my opinion, so I hung up after we spoke for a few more minutes, largely about her school-related issues. A final stunt, my mother began to cut off her texts as the days passed. I believe she understood I wouldn't back down, but she did one more thing that made me glad I had left. I received a text message one morning saying, "Hey, I heard about the drama with your mom. Are you okay?" From a relative I hadn't spoken to in years. I asked them what they were talking about, confused, and they sent me a screenshot of one of my mom's Facebook posts. She portrayed me as the bad guy in it, saying that I had abandoned her and the family when they were in need, omitting the part where she gave away my room, of course, and making it seem as though I had departed out of pure resentment. I was incensed. Arguing with me in private was one thing, but sharing our private problems on the internet? That was too much. I didn't reply to the post because I thought it wasn't worth the trouble. If she had to play the victim, then let her. I knew the truth, and so did the people who really mattered. My mom still texts me occasionally, but I limit the conversation to neutral subjects and keep it brief. I've learned to set boundaries and am no longer allowing her to guilt trip me. Now, a month later, I'm completely settled in my new place, my work is back on track, my stress levels are significantly lower, and I'm finally beginning to feel like myself again. If my mom couldn't give me the respect I deserve, I had to find it somewhere. Moving out was the best thing I could have done for myself, and I'm not looking back. Do I feel awful about leaving? Sometimes. Yes, it's terrible that things had to end this way, but I don't regret my choice. I was held in a Texas mental hospital for saying I didn't want to be pregnant. What should I do? A couple notes up front, I am a first-time mom, and this was a planned and wanted pregnancy. I am still trying to process the last 72 hours, which has caused me significant trauma and distress. I am writing this out publicly to warn other mothers. This happened in Texas. I am currently 9+1. I have been in the ER a couple times for severe 24/7 nausea, which is triggering significant panic attacks. The nausea is the worst at night and has been keeping me from sleeping, which makes my anxiety worse, plus I'm unable to keep down food and liquids. It's been seriously horrible. My first two ER doctors, women, were at separate ER locations and both gave me hydration. One gave me Zofran plus sugar, but then I had issues with the Zofran backing me up. I had another bad night of puking and panic attacks, and I called my mom in the morning crying because I was so miserable. She said she would go to a different ER with me, one that was a full hospital that had OBs on staff. When I got there, I explained the situation to a male ER doctor who spoke with me for less than 5 minutes. I told him my issues with waking up with nausea, then panic attacks, then sleeping. I told him that the panic attacks and combined with everything scared me and made me not want to be pregnant anymore, but I made it clear to him I just wanted relief and had no plan on hurting myself or anyone else. He refused to give me any medication, not even an IV bag to help with fluids. He sent a social worker to talk to me about the panic attacks and said she could find a facility that would take me who could help with medication plus sleep, etc. I said okay because I was so desperate at that point and had been in the ER for hours with no help whatsoever. He never even called OB. I haven't seen mine yet at all. I haven't even had an ultrasound. I get sent to the new clinic and by the time I get through processing it's 3 a.m., and I'm crying because I'm having high anxiety and I haven't slept. They never gave me my nighttime medications or anything. I finally went to bed around 4 a.m., and then they woke me back up at 6 a.m. to do my vitals and said I needed to go itemize my belongings. Once I woke up, the nausea hit me immediately and I asked for Zofran, which they refused because I had to see the internal medicine doctor first. I didn't get Zofran until 10:30 a.m., at which point I had missed breakfast and was non-stop puking. But the doctor would only allow one 4 milligram pill every 12 hours. I was so sick. Eventually I'm seen by a psychiatrist who I thought would be able to help me with meds, but he said no, I can't take anything because I'm pregnant and I'd have to talk to a different doctor who wasn't going to be in until Monday. This was on Saturday. At that point I freak out because now I'm away from home. They aren't giving me my over-the-counter meds like Unisum plus B6 for nausea or my prenatals. And they're not giving me enough Zofran to keep the nausea at bay. I said I wanted to leave then, as I was there voluntarily, and the doctor was mad and said I'd have to sign an AMA form and he'd place me on a 24-hour hold, where the other doctor would talk to me before the 24 hours and determine if they'd try to get a court order to keep me. I was so shocked. I asked if there was any way I could talk to someone, as I didn't want to say, and they were holding me involuntarily at that point. He said no. I'm a panicky sick mess after this and go through all the paperwork they gave me, which included the patient bill of rights, which stated patients had the right to be discharged within 4 hours of request unless the doctor believed I was a danger to myself or others, or that I was mentally unable to make medical decisions for myself. I requested a written justification from the doctor outlining which of those reasons he was using to justify the 24-hour hold, and he refused. He just kept saying I wasn't allowed to leave until I spoke with the other doctor, who wasn't going to be in till the next day. At around 3:30 my mom and fiance came for visitation, and I brought my paperwork with me and showed them the patient rights documents, and they were pissed, so they stayed 2.5 hours after visitation and argued with them to release me so I could go home, since they weren't even treating me anyway and withholding medications. The doctor refused to talk to my family even though I specifically included them on my medical release forms. So they had a right to request that information and were requesting a justification for keeping me there past the 4 hours. It got so bad my mom even called the cops and filed a police report. They refused to let me go, so I had to stay another night without Zofran and couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't keep food or water down. There was no doctor on staff at the time, so when the nurses called to get my Zofran prescription increased, the doctor didn't answer and they couldn't do anything for me. I could tell the nurses were trying their best and were very frustrated for me. The original doctor came back an hour before the 24 hours were up, and clearly did not want to talk to me. I think the other doctor said he wasn't getting involved because it was turning into a legal situation at that point. He was super short with me, and when I requested justification for the 24-hour hold, he said the ER doctor and said I didn't want to be pregnant anymore and used that as justification. I'm absolutely floored at this point. He didn't want to speak further about the issue and discharged me. But apparently no one knew how to discharge me because it's the weekend, so it took another few hours to even leave. The whole situation was so miserable and I legitimately feel traumatized by the experience. I still feel like I need help with the nausea and panic attacks, but I'm scared to go back to the ER now. It's been so horrible and I don't know what to do besides talk to my OB at my upcoming appointment and hope she's more understanding of my problems. I'm going to file complaints with the hospital and the state regarding what happened. I am also going to consult with a few lawyers to see if I have a case against them. This whole experience has left me feeling incredibly hopeless and frustrated with the medical system. I feel like I was punished for saying I didn't want to be pregnant anymore. As for me, I am currently staying with my mom's. I was able to finally get some rest and take enough Zofran and Unisum plus B6 to keep the puking at bay for a bit. I'm trying my best to keep my cool and avoid a panic attack. I appreciate any advice anyone could give on how to navigate this situation. Comments by OOP. I really wanted to move out of Texas before I got pregnant because I was so worried for those exact reasons. Doctors are too afraid to treat pregnant women here, and it's safer for them to do nothing, even if it's more detrimental to the mother and baby, than prescribe something and be held legally liable if something were to happen. It's a horrible, horrible byproduct of the current abortion ban. It's really hard to convey just how traumatizing it was with only words. I was taken away from my supportive fiancé and family to be basically held prisoner and denied medication while I couldn't stop vomiting. I was around strangers, had paper-thin scrubs, and a small blanket. The vomiting caused my throat to burn and I pulled a muscle in my neck, so it was hard to even move my head. I just cannot overstate how much worse this situation has become and the amount of physical and emotional damage it's caused. I genuinely felt so bad for the other patients there who clearly needed help. The doctor was so obviously uninterested and uncaring. It's hard for me to see how anyone there is getting the appropriate care level they need, or how being there would make anyone less suicidal. It seems like the hospital is there to fill beds and extract as much money out of insurance as possible while running a skeleton crew of workers who provide the minimum legal requirement of care. I will say the nurses there were great, but the facility and doctors themselves were an actual nightmare. Thank you. My mom is actually a retired police officer and works in records at a neighboring police department here, and she told them the same thing. They became very clammy and I think realized the situation was turning into a legal one and stopped really communicating with me or my family beyond what was absolutely required. I do agree with you fully. I am going to see what my OB does and says at my appointment tomorrow, then go from there. I am scared and nervous. It's hard at the moment because I also feel too weak to even advocate for myself properly. I'm too exhausted to fight at the moment, so I am hoping my support system will help me get through this and be tough for me. I will eventually come forward with my story. I really want to speak with a lawyer first and make sure all my ducks are in a row. I am also a semi-notable person in a niche field and am not public with my pregnancy and take my privacy very seriously. One of the nurses at the hospital even recognized me, which was also horrible in its own way. I'm sorry you also had to experience that. At one point I was laying on the bathroom floor wondering if I was going to die there. I was worried they were going to take me to court and force me to stay there longer without treatment and without my family. I'm not sure how I will eventually recover from this, but I know I have no other option than forward and things will eventually get better. If my fiancé and I have to empty our life savings to get me to another state for appropriate care, then we will do everything we can. That's the thing. If they had been providing me with medications and monitoring me, I would actually understand and probably wouldn't have left. But they weren't providing me with any treatment. I was having active panic attacks and I didn't even get a, hey, try these breathing exercises. They were just holding me hostage and denying me care. That's not true. There are plenty of medications that treat anxiety that are safe during pregnancy. Having constant panic attacks and not being able to keep down food or water is not safe for pregnancy or the baby either. You have to weigh the risks of each decision you make. I also suffer from ulcerative colitis, which is triggered by stress. I am off my UC medication because it's not safe during pregnancy. I almost lost my colon during my last flare, which lasted a year and a half, and I was on steroids for 7 months to help control the inflammation, which would absolutely not be safe for pregnancy. These conditions can quickly become life-threatening. I didn't request an ultrasound. I simply stated that I hadn't even had one yet. The reason I wanted to work with someone in OB was because it was clear the ER doctors were uncomfortable treating me because I was pregnant, and I thought an OB would be more knowledgeable in which medications are safest for pregnancy. Another reason I mentioned the ultrasound was because the reason for denying any medication was pregnancy. However, I wasn't even sure if the pregnancy was progressing correctly. It's my first pregnancy and my mother has a history or missed miscarriages where the baby stops developing but her body didn't start the physical process of expelling everything. Hopefully that adds more context. I am not familiar with the medical system and this is my first pregnancy. So I don't think it's unreasonable for me to think that maybe someone with more experience treating pregnant patients, in a state with very tight restrictions, would be a better fit for me at that moment. I personally think this is wildly unbelievable, but it happened to me. I have no prior history for psychiatric hospitalization. I take Buspro and Zoloft. I developed a panic disorder after being on prednisone for 7 months due to my ulcerative colitis, which was well managed before pregnancy. The constant vomiting triggers my anxiety, leading the panic attacks. To be clear, I was not involuntarily held. I went voluntarily because the social worker said they'd be able to help me with medication and sleep. The psych facility knew they had no reason to keep me, therefore could not obtain a court order. If they believed I was actually a danger to myself or others, then they would have gone this route, but they didn't. My nurse there said he believed I did not belong there. He even told my family that and fought to get me released. I understand you're making a judgment based on your experience and knowledge, but I hope you could put yourself in my shoes, as someone with very limited knowledge of the medical system and going through my first pregnancy. Our thought processes and reasoning are probably going to be vastly different. I did what I thought was the best thing to do in my situation, and it turned into a nightmare. I'm sorry if my story isn't believable to you. But I'm still going to do what I can to make sure this type of thing doesn't happen again in the future. And to be clear, the reason I went to different ERs was because the first one was a standalone private ER like a CarePoint or something, and the ER doctor recommended going to one with an OB attached next time. So the next time I went to a Baylor ER hospital, which I mistakenly thought was a full hospital, but it was some type of hybrid situation. I am not originally from Texas, so I'm not familiar with the hospitals around here. The next one I went to was an ER at a full hospital. To add more context, they had asked me if I had a history of panic attacks, and I explained that I did. I had developed a panic disorder after being on prednisone for 7 months, due to my ulcerative colitis. They asked what I would do in those situations to avoid triggers, etc. Before, my panic attacks were focused mainly on social situations or being too far from a bathroom, etc. So to avoid triggers, I'd do things like change my diet, or avoid situations where there was no bathroom. But now my trigger was the pregnancy symptoms, which I can't avoid because I can't not be pregnant anymore. I said the panic attacks and nausea made me not want to be pregnant, which I believe was misconstrued. But I think there's some pretty crazy implications of saying any pregnant woman who says they don't want to be pregnant anymore can be held involuntarily at a psychiatric hospital. Honestly, I would have been more than happy to stay there, but because I wasn't really being given any further treatment, I just wanted to go home to my family and support system. If I was going to be vomiting, I'd prefer to do it in my own toilet. I was also worried about missing my OB appointment if they decided to hold me longer. The original ER doctor did not have enough to send me there involuntarily, and the psych at the facility openly admitted he believed the ER doctor misled me and was the one to tell me to fill out the AMA, but placed me on a 24-hour hold because it was their policy, which I had pointed out contradicted Texas state law for patients who were there voluntarily. This facility has been open for only 10 months or so, and one nurse said it's very rare that someone would come there voluntarily but then request to leave so quickly, but I think a lot of those voluntary patients have been through that system before, so know what to expect versus I had no clue. When I pointed out the 4-hour release requirement in the documents they gave me, they didn't even know that it was in there. They said all patients get a 24-hour hold and they've never released someone within 4 hours. I meet with my OB tomorrow, so hopefully I'll get some better support there. Thanks for listening. It's so scary. One girl at the facility I spoke to had been there 3 times for suicidal thoughts. She said she believed the facility wasn't supportive for patients who have disabilities or are pregnant. She said one time her roommate had dementia and was clearly not taking care of her hygiene or self at all, and the girl tried to advocate for the woman, but the woman received no help. The facility is new, open for only about 10 months, and I think they're trying accepting anyone to fill beds even if they aren't properly equipped to care for them. I think a lot of these people don't have the wherewithal or the family support to advocate for them either, so nothing ever gets done and no one is held accountable. It's a nightmare situation and had been incredibly eye-opening. The social worker said that they were originally going to try to get me into one of the private rooms that they had at the hospital, but came back later and said the psychiatrist, I assume, denied me. So she said she was going to call some other places and see if she could get me into one of them. Maybe 2 hours later she came back and said she found a place who would accept me. This new place was indeed a locked facility. They have only been open for 10 months and seem to be accepting everyone. There were 2 other individuals who were admitted at the same time from the same hospital. One I believe was there for alcohol withdrawal and the other expressed thoughts of suicide. The first ER doctor just seemed really busy and didn't want to deal with me. Then the psych at the facility was just the on-call doctor and clearly didn't want to be there and kept saying he couldn't release me until I spoke with the attending who wasn't there because it was the weekend. I don't think they've ever had anyone challenge them on the 4-hour rule, as the place has only been open for 10 months. I was in a locked psychiatric hospital. No, you cannot just get up and walk out. Update. First, I'd like to say thank you to the outpouring of support. It really means a lot to me. I'm going to start with a very small update, and then at the end I'm going to answer some questions, clear up some misconceptions about what happened. Update. I did see my new OB/GYN and had my first ultrasound. My little guy is measuring right on time and has a heartbeat of 167. I feel overwhelmed with relief knowing he is safe there and doing well. I explained the whole situation to my OB and she was incredibly understanding. She gave me a new prescription of Zofran and took some labs while I was there to check my electrolytes and probably some other things. I'll have another follow-up with her soon. At this point I feel comfortable enough working with her, so that's my current plan. As for complaints and legal stuff, there isn't much movement on that front due to the holiday, but I still have every intention to pursue those options and will try to update as much as I can. Now the other stuff. I did not expect that post to gain as much attention as it did. It was cross-posted many times and the responses were overwhelmingly sympathetic, but there was a ton of skepticism, especially from doctors who read it. But hey, it's the internet, so that's to be expected, I guess. At the end of the day, I don't need any strangers online to believe what happened to me, because I have recourse in real life and that's ultimately what matters. I was accused of changing my story, but I think that was mainly from people who skim my posts, so below I'm going to clear up some things and provide some additional details, not because I have to, but because I think if there's going to be discourse about my experience, I want it to start from a place of accuracy of timeline and events. Starting with, at no point was the court involved with the decision-making process. I went to the ER willingly. They made it seem like they were not equipped to help my situation and that the other facility would be able to help me with my sleeping and panic attacks. I was so run down by the time the social worker came to my room that I'd have agreed to go anywhere they said would provide me with relief. I went to the new facility voluntarily of my own free will. There was no 72-hour hold. When I mentioned 72 hours in my last post, I meant that the whole situation from going to the ER to leaving the new facility took place over 72 hours. Once I got to the new facility and met with the doctors, I realized that I was not in the right place to get the care I personally needed. I was away from my support system, not being given the proper medication to control my vomiting, my anxiety was significantly heightened, and I was not being given any additional treatment or resources, so to me there was no point in me being at the facility, and it was indeed making my situation undoubtedly worse. After speaking with the on-call psychiatrist, he told me that he thought the ER doctor misled me, and that I'd need to sign an AMA form which would place me on a 24-hour hold. It was clear he did not want to be the one to discharge me and insisted I needed to speak with the attending. He mentioned the possibility of a court order but said it was unlikely they'd get one for my case. After that conversation I went to review the paperwork they gave me during admission. I found the patient bill of rights which stated that for voluntary patients, they had a right to be released within 4 hours of their request. Unless 1. I changed my mind and wanted to stay. 2. I was under the age of 16 and my Gradian didn't want to release me, or 3. If the doctor has reason to believe that I might meet the criteria for court-ordered services or emergency detention because, 1. I'm likely to cause serious harm to myself, 2. I'm likely to cause serious harm to others, or 3. My condition will continue to deteriorate, and I am unable to make informed decisions as to whether or not to stay for treatment. After I read that, I bought the papers to the nurses and requested a justification from the psychiatrist for the 24-hour hold. I wanted to know which reasons he was using. The psychiatrist did not provide reason or justification beyond the attending needed to evaluate me. That's it. To be clear, this is illegal. They had zero reason to keep me past the 4 hours. At no time had I indicated I was a threat to myself or others. Not verbally, or written on any of the questionnaires that I had filled out during admissions. The attending work that day is not a legal justification to hold me. Their schedule does not supersede my rights as a patient. Now after the 24 hours was up, the original on-call doctor came back to discharge me. He was clearly agitated that the attending refused to come in to do the discharge, so I never at any point spoke with the attending who was originally assigned to me. The on-call doctor did not seek a court order to detain me. The conversation lasted about 10 minutes or less. When I asked again for the justification to keep me, he asked me if I said anything to the ER doctor about wanting to end my pregnancy, and I told him I just said I didn't want to be pregnant because I was so miserable. I then tried to ask if he believed that was enough justification for the hold, but he cut me off. It was clear he didn't want to engage in any further conversation. My concern here was the implications of legally being allowed to involuntarily commit any woman who said she didn't want to be pregnant anymore, which seems insane to me. But I digress. To answer questions about the facility, why didn't I just leave? Because this was a locked facility. I couldn't just get up and walk out of the door. How were they able to take me so fast? This facility has been open only for 10 months. They had beds and empty rooms available when I was there. Questions about my ER visits. I had 3 separate visits which took place over 4 weeks. The first ER I went to was a standalone clinic not associated with a larger hospital. The doctor there said next time to go to an ER attached to a hospital with L&D. So the next time I went to an ER, I went to an ER hospital that I mistakenly thought was a full hospital, but it was a hybrid and they did not have L&D. The third ER was attached to a full hospital. I was not doctor shopping, I'm just not familiar with the hospital systems here. Regarding my comments about ultrasounds and OBs. I never requested an ultrasound during any of my visits to the ER. I mentioned the ultrasound in the original post just to state I hadn't had one yet and hadn't been evaluated by an OB yet. My mother has a history of missed miscarriages, so in my head I thought it could be a possibility, and if I was being denied medication for being pregnant, I was just hoping I did have a viable pregnancy. But again, I didn't request an ultrasound. Concerns regarding DIY abortion. I am not and have never considered a DIY abortion. I am lucky enough to have all the resources I would need to fly anywhere in the world to get appropriate medical care if I had decided to go that route. Both my fiancé and I work high-paying remote tech jobs, and in the worst case we could move out of state tomorrow if I absolutely needed to. Obviously this isn't an ideal route, but it is an option that is still on the table, even if it's just to get care in a better medical system outside the state of Texas. Medications I'm currently taking. 10 mg buspirone twice a day, 50 mg Zoloft. Zofran, Unisum plus B6, prenatals, no benzos. So to cut through all the BS, whether you agree or not with the doctor's course of actions, I hope most people can see that the facility was not the right place for me to be. They were not well equipped to handle my pregnancy symptoms, they were clearly understaffed, and they were not providing me with any additional treatment that I wasn't getting at home. There was no reason for me to be there. It made things in my case significantly worse, and I hope maybe if anything people can just learn from my experience. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for their support and for the DMs I received. I'm also so sorry for all the other similar stories I've read. It seems like there's a bigger issue happening here, and I hope others can eventually find peace too. I am going to continue to work diligently with my OB, psychiatrist, and hopefully a therapist so I can really unpack this entire situation. As I said before, I'll try to update as much as I can, but I'm sure the complaint and legal process will be slow moving. I'd also like to ask if you know any attorneys in the DFW area who may be interested in this case. Please feel free to shoot me a private DM with their information so I can follow up. I will also try to answer any additional questions in the comments, in case there's anything else I'm forgetting. Obligatory, sorry for the terrible formatting, I'm on mobile. Devastated by my husband's wealthy family's reaction to my thoughtful $900 Christmas guitar gift. Was it not enough for them? Original post, I come from poverty. It is what it is, I had a very rich childhood in all ways except financially. Christmas was saved for the year round, and we got one thing to wear, one book, and one fun thing. My husband comes from a family that grossed $300,000 a year, and Christmas was always a massive show-off. Each kid had $2,000 plus under the tree, easy. My husband and I started dating 5 years ago and have been married for 2.5. We've clawed our way up in life. He was not given financial help as an adult, and this year is the first time we can spend some decent money on Christmas. He has been wanting a guitar for some time. He has never played and has expressed interest so many times, but we couldn't do it financially. I did lots of research, and from what I saw, beginner's guitars were $150-ish and went from there, up to your $5,000 plus for really nice ones. I agonized over what I was going to choose, and ended up telling him to cut the budget for me so that I could surprise him with a really nice gift, so I thought. My original budget was $500, but I really wanted to go big or go home. It ended up being around $900 Canadian dollars, plus $200 for accessories or so. Being able to spend that amount is just unfathomable for a former poor kid. But I did it because he deserves it. We finally have the means, and I was beyond excited to see his face light up. Christmas morning comes and the tree gifts wait until his family arrives. I am basically giddy at this point with excitement. Our turn comes for a couple gifts and I bring the guitar case out from its hiding place. He's so excited and opens the case, revealing the guitar. And then, "Oh, thanks babe. Never heard of this brand." Not the overwhelming joy I was hoping for, but it's not about me, right? His brother says, "Aw, it's nice, a decent, cheap one to start out with." His dad chimes in, having played in his 20s, and says it's known for its lower-end models, and they'd be happy to chip in for a nice one next year if he sticks with it. I have never felt such a punch to the gut. I assume I'm overthinking as per usual, but I am still so devastated from this 10 seconds of today and I can't even really verbalize why. It felt like I was 9 years old again, trying to be excited about my new Aeropostale hoodie with my friend that got a MacBook and a Disney trip for Christmas. I think those comments affected how my husband viewed it too, because he hasn't touched it since, despite wanting it so badly for years. I guess I'm just venting. I feel so small and I just had to get it out. Some of OP's comments. Commenter, I'm wondering if maybe your husband had a specific brand of guitar in mind that he wanted and that's why he reacted that way. Not sure if that'll help you feel better, but that was my first thought. OP. I don't think he did. He's usually pretty forward with things and has never mentioned a specific brand. He's not super knowledgeable about any of it. My dad said the brand is a common enough brand. I know his brother does have a Les Paul though, so by comparison is definitely pales if he is only familiar with the very high-end names. Editor's note, Les Pauls are very nice guitars and range in price quite a bit. Here's a Wikipedia link and link to their website. What brand did you get? It's a Guild 250E. The person I spoke to at the music shop, Canada, said it was a very good choice. He talked me out of the two other options, and reassured me of the quality longevity. I was actually quite shocked he didn't know the brand, even as a non-musician. Editor's note, not a Les Paul obviously, but not a crappy guitar at all. Wikipedia link and website. A commenter replies, do you know the preceding letter for the 250E model? Guild has an interesting history of ownership, having once been owned by Fender and now owned by Yamaha. They make some very good guitars across a wide price range. You got him a nice guitar, OP. OP. Sorry, yes, F250E, blonde jumbo. Not sure if that makes a difference. That commenter replies, Considering Guild has the F55E that retails at $4,600 USD, their family saying it's a cheaper guitar brand is extra rich. You got the right guitar. It's a nice price range from a trusted brand. The family is trash. Your husband probably is not sure what guitar he wants. I'd take him to the music store and have him try out some models. Worse comes to worse, you keep the Guild. Commenter. How does he normally handle the class difference in your relationship? Oopie. He honestly never mentions it. It hasn't been a huge hurdle. We did struggle to meet in the middle when it came to what is essential, versus just wants. Both of us had a skewed idea of that. But I think he had to rough it enough at 21 to 26 to be based in reality 90% of the time. Christmas just seems to be the exception. Commenter. Sounds like you're actually devastated about your husband's reaction to the gift, not his family's reaction. OP. I think you're right. I was expecting him to be so excited and then it just didn't really happen like that in the end. This guitar had been a passing conversation for years. My little sister was also very excited and helped me pick it out, so I think I also felt crushed for her too. Commenter. You cut the budget from your own present, and he agreed? Jesus, that's brutal. You need to think long and hard about potential children being exposed to this toxic materialistic mentality. Regardless of income, those comments were disgusting, but they seem set in their ways. OP. I still think he spent way over budget on me, so I don't know if he actually agreed. I'll give him that. He knows I stress about money endlessly, so I'm assuming he just agreed to make me feel better about wanting to spend more what he got for her presents. He honestly did. He was very thoughtful. He got me a purse I've been wanting for a hot minute, and quite a few other things that he took note of over the past few months. He definitely went over the new budget. Not the same price, but I really and truly am not a gift person, so the thought is 100x more important to me. Commenter. Just an assumption, but even when he had to rough it, he did always have his family to fall back on? As in he wouldn't be homeless or anything? That gives a very different mentality to someone who does have to genuinely fear homelessness and honesty. I think spending your childhood and many teen years in financial comfort is going to have a much larger effect on someone's values than a few years of scrimping and saving as a young adult. OP. Yeah, I suppose our idea of roughing it definitely differed. There has always been the safety net. He was pretty good about not using it and holding his own, but it was definitely still there. OP expands. He got a taste of normal life because they didn't give him money to start out. He had to get his crappy minimum wage job like the rest of us, save, and work up from there. Our collision of worlds has actually been good because he reminds me I deserve new jeans when mine have holes, and I remind him that he doesn't need a new pair of jeans every week. So it's only really when we're with them that he reverts back to this. Commenter. I can't help but mention I came from a household whose parents grossed a bit more than you mentioned, and Christmas was never $2,000 plus pet a child. That level of gift giving sounds excessive for reasons beyond income. What you got would have been a special gift by my or my family's understanding. OP. It's completely infuriating to watch. The first year actually made me so mad. To remember my parents scraping dimes together just to get me a book, and then to watch two grown men completely surrounded by their new consoles, an entire new wardrobe, so many things. I cried wondering what I'd gotten myself into. His mom went so overboard on me as well, and I can't even explain the guilt I felt. Commenter. Will he stand up for you in disagreements with his family about where to live, how you raise your children, against snide remarks from family members? If he doesn't have your back now, he never will. OP. Yes, in other ways he definitely does. His parents disagree with many things we're doing with our daughter, namely, getting 99% of things secondhand, aside from car seat and mattresses, and letting her get dirty. And he is usually quick to tell them, my kid, my rules. This was not typical behavior, which made it sting a little bit more. I think. Update. Same post. I spoke with him this morning, trying to be very calm. I'm not confrontational by nature, so I put my anger aside and went into it with patience and grace. I asked if he was upset about the guitar, either the brand choice, the appearance, or something. I told him my feelings were hurt when his family made comments, even if unintentionally, that made it seem like I chose a child's starter instrument or something. I explained that I'd put a lot of thought and research into the build, the color, everything, so make sure his first experience with a guitar was very positive. He was shocked to hear that I'd been thinking about it that way. He didn't think twice about what his family said. He apologized for their reaction and explained that his comment about the brand was nothing more than what it seemed. He'd never heard of the brand, that's all. He said he loved it and was just caught up on the craziness of Christmas, which is why he hadn't played it yet. It eased my mind a lot. I guess I'm just used to over-the-top reactions in my family. I think I'm still disappointed after a month's worth of excitement building was slashed pretty quickly, But at the end of the day, knowing he likes it makes their opinion mean a lot less. 11 months update. Am I the asshole for not letting my husband into the labor room and picking our child's name? Original post. This is a throwaway account because I'm so annoyed and need to vent. This will be a lot, so I'm sorry in advance. I, 28F, had been together with my husband, 27M, for nearly 10 years. We got married at 21, had our first son a year after, followed by our daughter 3 years later. I built my whole life around my family. We got good jobs. He worked full-time, I worked from home, we had a good home in a great neighborhood, and we put our children in good schools. We also had a successful business on the side. I thought we did everything right. My best friend, since we were in middle school, lived close. We had our daughters around the same time, and we'd have playdates all the time. We leaned on each other a lot. I gave her all the support when she was going through issues with her daughter's deadbeat father and got her in contact with a good lawyer. I leaned on her when I was recovering from my traumatic second birth and the depression that followed. We leaned on each other for everything. 10 months ago, I found out I was pregnant for the third time. I was really uneasy about this because of my traumatic experience the second time. Also, my husband and I both agreed we were done after our 2 children. I considered abortion, but my husband insisted we keep it. I was still uneasy about the pregnancy and borderline miserable for the next 6 months. I was diagnosed with hyperemesis gravidarum and was throwing up 20 times a day for 6 months straight. I lost a ton of weight, had to stop working, and was sent to the hospital frequently due to severe dehydration. My husband stood by me and showered me with attention, for which I was so grateful. He cut down his hours at work to look after me, the house, and the kids. My best friend would come to our home frequently to check on me and also help with the house. When I hit 6 months, the hyperemesis gravidarum decreased a lot, and I was almost back to myself. One night after having a movie night with my family, my husband and I were getting ready to sleep. He fell asleep right away while I quickly checked on the kids before getting into bed. His phone was vibrating like crazy, so out of genuine curiosity, I unlocked his phone. We used to do this a lot when we were younger, so I didn't think too much of it. I was already sitting in bed. I saw messages from my friend. They were frantic spam messages. One of them said, "Please come over, I need you." Another said, "I know I shouldn't be messaging here, but I miss you. And come over when she's asleep." I think I was there in a daze for nearly 5 minutes. I cried a lot quietly, and the fatigue kind of left me. I scoured his phone looking for more. I saw emails and DMs from them both, even using apps like Kik to message, and the pictures. But the worst part was finding out my husband left me one time in the hospital with my mother while he went back home, where my kids were being babysat by my friend, and got intimate in our bedroom, with our kids in the house. I kicked him out the following morning after confronting him and filed for separation sometime after. For the next 2 months, he had been begging for forgiveness, then complaining and insulting me that I'm not letting him see his kids or that I'm stopping him from going with me to doctor appointments, which I had been. We had planned months earlier about who was going to be in the labor room. It was going to be my mother and husband. He called me when I was 35 weeks, questioning the labor situation. At this point, he had moved in with my ex-friend's house shortly before this call. I said no, and he got very angry. Lots of my in-laws and family members told me to put our differences aside for our baby. I still said no. I gave birth to my son with my mother and sister present and didn't feel any regret about my choice. After my second traumatic birth, I just wanted to make sure this one was as stable as possible, which it was. We were going to name our child after his father who passed away. I went along with it to make him happy but changed my mind and picked a name I had always loved since childhood. This aggravated him even more. AITA? Because I'm being guilt-tripped by many people right now. All I want is for everyone to leave me alone and for me to just be with my kids. Edit. Just wanted to add that I do let him see the kids. That would be crazy if I didn't. My children love their dad. I just have certain boundaries now that we aren't together, and he doesn't respect them. He gets angry and says things that are categorically not true. He got to meet our newborn son hours after I gave birth. AITA has no consensus bot. OOP was NTA top comments commenter 1. NTA, this is a scenario where you should feel safe and comfortable. He was cheating and left you in the hospital, so you shouldn't listen to him. Commenter 2. Lots of my in-laws and family members told me to put our differences aside for our baby. You can tell everyone that you put the safety of your baby and yourself ahead of someone else's wants. You made the right decision. They should be grateful that you had enough strength to put your lives and safety first. NTA. Commenter 3. NTA. How could you have a stress-free birth with him in the room? Why did he even feel entitled to ask? Commenter 4, absolutely NTA. Your soon-to-be ex-husband and your ex-friend are both monumentally huge pieces of shit. Wow. I'm so sorry, I hope you find someone else to love and love you after this is all settled. Update. So, I'm back after nearly a whole year. I completely forgot about this post because I've been so wrapped up in other things. For anyone who doesn't want to read the whole post, here's a summary. My husband had been cheating on me with my best friend while I was pregnant. I was close to giving birth and decided not to have my then husband in the labor room with me. I also chose a name for our baby that he didn't agree with. Like I said, it's basically been a whole year. My baby turned 1 today, and after celebrating his birthday and Christmas with my kids, it finally hit me that this is my new reality. First of all, my ex-husband and I finally went through with the divorce proceedings. I had been holding it off during my pregnancy and early postpartum period to avoid added stress and to carefully plan for my children and myself. I was awarded primary physical custody of our children. Their dad visits once a week, and the 2 older kids, 7 and 4, spend every other weekend with him. My youngest will start doing the same in a couple of months, which makes me nervous. He's especially clingy with me, all my kids are, but my youngest has really only known me as the most present parent. One of the main stipulations in our custody agreement is that my ex's affair partner is prohibited from seeing the kids. My poor kids have been confused enough by their parents' sudden split, and I didn't want them even more confused by seeing their aunt, who is supposed to be mommy's best friend, with their dad. It was deemed emotionally detrimental in court. As for the baby name, he's been so bitter about it. I think he's still annoyed about it. His side has been trying to convince me to change the name to something we'd both like, especially after the divorce was finalized. But it's been a year now, and the baby quite literally answers by the name I gave him, so I'm not going to be changing it. He was also unhappy with the child support payments, among other payments, and asked for some revisions. One main thing he asked to change was the cost of our kids' school tuition. He pays for their tuition, which he felt was too much and too harsh. But the court stuck with the original payments. As for my ex-husband and ex-best friend, they continued dating. I found out that they had started seeing each other a month into my 3rd pregnancy. They had actually slept together during my 2nd pregnancy but didn't pursue a relationship then because, as they put it, they weren't ready to ruin things and didn't want to hurt anybody. My ex's side have been very supportive of their relationship, even inviting her to holiday gathering like Thanksgivings or family holidays. Because of this, my kids don't go very often to these events. I don't know, after this whole fiasco I'm coming to the realization that perhaps my ex's side never really liked me all that much. But that's okay. I eventually spoke with my ex-best friend to ask why they did it. She claimed that they were just friends but grew close while she was dealing with issues involving her deadbeat ex-boyfriend. Both of them insisted that my ex-husband just wanted to protect her, which supposedly turned into love. Hearing this hurt me a lot, but at the same time, I felt relieved to know the truth. When I sat with this information for a while, it stopped hurting. It made me realize that I didn't still love my ex-husband and could finally let go of him and their betrayal. They broke up a week ago. Apparently, it's just a break, though who knows? Although my kids go to their dad's house every other weekend, it has helped a lot with making time for myself. Obviously, I'm figuring out who I am without being a wife or mom all the time. In many ways, I find what happened to be a true blessing, which is why I'm no longer angry. As for me, I've been seeing someone. It hasn't been very long, nor is it that serious yet, but we get along great. Initially, my ex-husband made the whole situation difficult. He didn't want me to have any man, specifically, around the kids. Edit. I don't know how to update posts, so my apologies if it's wrong. This is likely the last update, just wanted to check in to let everyone know I'm okay. Relevant comments. Commenter 1. Did he break up with the ex-best friend after he learned that you are seeing someone? Oop. I started seeing this guy in October. He found out about it in late November. OOP explains about the court order on not allowing the children see their father's affair partner. OOP. True, it was something I didn't even think I'd get, but if there's evidence that them being around her could be emotionally detrimental, then it can be done. But you must show concrete evidence. During our separation, I had put my older 2 in therapy to cope with the change, and I was able to use their therapist as the evidence needed. It's not a permanent stipulation anyways either. Commenter 2, good job. Never let that snake friend back into your life, even if she comes crawling back now. OP. She claimed that I had not been the greatest friend to her at times during our very long friendship either. Commenter 3, OMG. None of us are perfect and most of us can't be the greatest friend all the time, but that doesn't mean we fuck our friends' husbands when they aren't the greatest. She's literally the worst. Oop. I felt like strangling her at that moment. I couldn't think of a single thing I did wrong that could warrant her doing that to me. But it is what it is. After warning my brother-in-law about his wife's infidelity, my husband left me. 3 years later, his life collapsed due to gambling. 10 years ago, I, a 37-year-old woman, married my now ex-husband Liam, a 42-year-old man. I did have some problems with his family, but overall, our marriage was good. We got along well though, because it was nothing that I couldn't ignore or endure. The members of Liam's family were quite close to one another. My former brother-in-law Jonathan, now 48, was married to his older sister, Emily, now 46. Emily was a stay-at-home mother to her 2 children with Jonathan. Liam just showered the children with affection because they were his favorite. I really loved them, and they were excellent kids. Everything was cool between Liam and myself since I was the fun aunt. Liam and I experienced some financial difficulties about 5 years ago. I had taken time off work to attend to my mental well-being. My last job was incredibly toxic, with demands that never stopped and no boundaries. My supervisors and managers were as unsupportive as they could be, and I was supposed to be at their beck and call constantly. I made the decision to take a break from work at that point since I was in a terrible mental state. When I talked to Liam about my choice, he was encouraging and urged me to pursue it. For personal costs, we always kept our money apart. For shopping, household bills, date nights, and anything else we did together, we had a joint account. We made contributions to this account in line with our incomes. Even though we each donated the same percentage of our income, Liam's contribution was greater in absolute terms because he made more money. Before choosing to take a break, I had thoroughly examined my financial situation. I felt confident that I could comfortably cover my part until I was prepared to go back to work. Liam even offered to pay my portion during this time, but I turned him down right away. I had enough savings to handle, and I didn't want to mess with our arrangement. We shouldn't have had the financial difficulties we did because Liam had a lucrative position at a large corporation. But 3 months into my hiatus, Liam began acting oddly. Even when I spent my own money to buy something new or suggest ordering takeout, he would get upset with me. Only for shared expenses and never for my own purposes did I use some of the money from the joint account. He would either start acting rudely or create flimsy reasons if I suggested going out to eat on a given day since I didn't feel like cooking. I tried bringing it up a few times before giving up. But he would behave oddly even when I spent my own resources, which were funds beyond his control. This was very out of character for him. Throughout our whole marriage, Liam had never made an effort to dictate or offer commentary on my financial decisions. I drew him aside and inquired about his condition. After initially attempting to dismiss it, he finally admitted that he had spent practically all of our savings on gambling. Almost nothing remained for us. He had always handled our money, and I had also put my trust in him. I had total faith in him, therefore I never looked at my account. At first, I assumed he was kidding because this had never happened before. But what really startled me was the intensity in his eyes. I wanted to get away from him right away. I was meant to take this time off from work to take care of my mental health because he had gambled away my entire life savings. Rather, I was now confronted with the daunting task of organizing our financial matters. Our financial condition was much worse than he had acknowledged when I looked it over. Our house was about to be repossessed, and we were literally bankrupt. I got him into treatment and began applying for jobs in a frenzy. Fortunately, I was offered a position within 3 days, with great benefits. I was confident that I could gradually restore our riches and finances. There was so much to accomplish that I didn't even have time to comprehend my anger, even though I was outraged with him for breaching my confidence. I kept asking Liam to ask Jonathan for assistance during this time. Despite Jonathan's money, Liam consistently turned him down. I knew I couldn't continue to sink while he allowed his ego to get in the way, even though I didn't understand his hesitancy. After a while, I gave Jonathan a call, described the circumstances, and he assisted us right away. Liam began a quarrel rather than express gratitude. He said that in front of his brother-in-law, I had emasculated him. His ego and the facade he had built were more important to him than anything else, even at this crucial juncture in our lives, when we were essentially beginning over. That was the turning point for me. I was enraged. Not only had he ruined his own efforts, but he had ruined mine as well. He ruined everything we had planned for our family's future. I informed him that his lack of responsibility for our family and future demonstrated emasculation. We had intended to try for a child, so this was particularly upsetting. I made it very plain that until he changed his ways, I would not have a child with him. Instead of being appreciative that I had helped us escape the disaster he had made, with Jonathan's assistance, he reacted by accusing me of being a domineering wife. We put a lot of effort into rebuilding our finances over the course of the following year and a half, paying Jonathan back in full. Jonathan helped us get out of a predicament that had nothing to do with him, and for that I will always be thankful. But Liam was still upset that I had asked Jonathan for assistance. He didn't want the family to be aware of our financial predicament. Fortunately, Jonathan never told anyone, not even Emily, about it. Although Liam and I were still at odds, I wanted our relationship to finally improve. But I lost all regard for him as a person once whatever happened. After getting back on our feet, things started to improve. However, I observed tension between Jonathan and Emily at family get-togethers. I couldn't help but worry about Jonathan in particular. I told Liam that I was worried and asked him if he had also realized anything was off or if I was the only one. He dismissed it, claiming that nothing was wrong and that I was just overanalyzing it. But I went to Emily's apartment 2 days later to bring some tarts for the kids, and they were a huge hit. But Emily was acting really weirdly. She was clearly pressed for time and wanted me out of there as soon as possible. I left the home to see what she was up to, but I opted to wait in my car because I felt something wasn't right. Call me spooky or what, but I had a gut feeling that something was going on and I needed to step in. Suddenly I noticed a man exiting the house, and Emily was escorting him back. I wouldn't have had any suspicions at first, but her guilty behavior increased suspicions. The man slouched and wore a cap as though he didn't want to be identified. I quickly realized she was cheating on Jonathan after observing their body language. Her rudeness and lack of thanks horrified and sickened me. A part of me wanted to approach her right away, but I wasn't sure whether it was the appropriate thing to do and was too afraid of her response. Rather, I made the decision to head right home and inform Liam of what I had witnessed. I thought Liam would be shocked, angry, disgusted, or perhaps even incredulous. His real response was something I never would have predicted. After a few seconds of silence, Liam inquired as to whether I had discussed it with anyone else. He let out a breath of relief when I responded no, and advised me to keep what I had witnessed to myself. It would be an understatement to say I was taken aback. If he believed that I would remain silent and allow Jonathan to suffer in a marriage with an unfaithful woman, I told him he was crazy. Liam proposed that they might have an open marriage and contended that we weren't certain if she was unfaithful. We both knew Jonathan well enough to know that he would never consent to such a deal, I retorted. Nevertheless, Liam maintained that interfering was none of our business. I informed him that we wanted to be sure Emily wasn't betraying Jonathan, even if he had consented to something out of the ordinary. I insisted that before we confronted Emily, we speak with Jonathan. I was aware that Emily would immediately fabricate a falsehood to protect herself if she was involved in any questionable activities. Liam objected and made a number of reasons why we shouldn't tell Jonathan. I shouldn't get involved in other people's personal issues, he remarked. He went on to say that neither of us was aware of all the specifics of their relationship. I must admit that there were times when I nearly gave in. I started to doubt myself after Liam's deceptive arguments, and I even thought about speaking with Emily first. My logical mind, however, realized that something was off and that I had to intervene to support the man who had saved my family. Liam was playing on my emotional side, which kept dragging me in the other direction and pressuring me to believe his ridiculous defenses and explanations for Emily's actions. I fought this internal conflict for a long time. I finally came to the conclusion that I could no longer handle it. Even if it meant paying a price, I had to act morally. I told Liam about my choice before telling Jonathan. It would be an understatement to say that he went completely insane. That day, we got into the biggest fight of our lives. Simply put, he refused to listen to me. Compared to the fights we had during his whole gambling period, this one was considerably worse. He insisted that I had no right to meddle in and destroy his sister's life. I told him that I was concerned about his attitude about infidelity and his strong protection of his sister, and I wondered how he would respond if I cheated. In response, he said he didn't want anybody else to inform him of his wife's adultery. However, I didn't believe it. I couldn't get the suspicion that he was trying to justify his own actions by defending Emily's adultery. It made me question whether Liam was being unfaithful to me. The suspicion persisted even though I had no evidence or explanation beyond his response. I drove to Jonathan's house because I was determined to do the right thing. Unfortunately, Emily wasn't there when I tried to address her with Jonathan present. I described all I saw to Jonathan. In front of me, he sobbed and admitted that he had suspected Emily of being unfaithful but lacked evidence. He didn't want to make a snap judgment and accuse her. I acknowledged that I lacked solid proof as well. She was merely agitated when I saw her, and a male left the house immediately after. Although my intuition told me otherwise, I informed Jonathan that it might have been a coworker, a friend, or anybody else. Our talk ended when he thanked me for telling him. There was no news for several weeks. I was engaged in a kind of cold battle with Liam. I don't believe he told Jonathan or Emily that I had found out about her affair. Then one day Jonathan revealed that he and Emily were divorcing. My ex-father-in-law and ex-mother-in-law were taken aback by this news because none had predicted it. With their intense love and lovely lifestyle, Emily and Jonathan had always seemed like the ideal pair. Everyone was shocked, with the exception of myself. Jonathan continued to act like a gentleman, but Emily appeared glum and as like she had been crying for days. He just said that there was nothing left to save in their relationship, but he never gave an explanation for his decision to break up with her. Emily arrived at my house a few days later, yelling uncontrollably. I realized then that I was the one who had told Jonathan, as Liam had claimed to have told her. I can't even recall the disgusting things she said to me, including her curses. I remained composed and informed her that she was the cause of this. Nothing would change if you blamed me. She was the only one who had to deal with the fallout from her decision to cheat. I had entirely ceased talking to Liam by now. It became mentally taxing to live in the same house as him every day. Liam and Emily gradually started to turn other family members against me. Liam informed his mother that I had given Jonathan false information about poor Emily, which resulted in their split, and Emily prevented her children from seeing me. I became the antagonist overnight. Everyone was too preoccupied with agitating me to notice the true source of the issue. I eventually had enough one day and lost my temper. Since his gambling was discovered, Liam and I had been having problems, and I was certain that I wanted to get a divorce from him because of all this drama. I would never respect him again because of anything he did. Living with a gambler and someone who could justify cheating was not anything I could imagine. His actions gave the impression that he was guilty, and I must admit that I secretly feared he was also cheating on me. I had, however, psychologically checked out of the marriage by this time. I wouldn't have cared if he had an affair. It would have only strengthened my resolve to get a divorce. I brought the family together and explained the true cause of Emily and Jonathan's divorce. I told Liam that I had caught Emily with a stranger and that he had fiercely protected his sister. When I told Jonathan about the affair, Emily and Liam started openly disparaging me, and I explained that nothing I said had convinced him to see reason. I also informed the family that I was done putting up with their terrible treatment of me during this journey. I was shocked to learn that both my ex-father-in-law and ex-mother-in-law stood up for their kids. At that point, I realized beyond a reasonable doubt that this family was wholly toxic. For the sake of my mental health, I understood that walking away was the proper thing to do. There was absolute stillness in the room as I made the public announcement that I would also be filing for divorce. Liam was astonished, as though a bulb had been struck over his head. I was very gratified by his wide-eyed response. I also informed him that I was determined to go with the divorce and that he had to leave my home within 2 weeks because his family was so close. Liam's tone completely changed. He began to sincerely apologize and pleaded with me to make amends. He made an effort to change things up by planning date evenings and scheduling spa treatments as though my problem was that I wasn't paying enough attention. He didn't realize how serious the situation was. I had to sit him down and tell him that I didn't like him as a person anymore, thus I was leaving him. There was nothing he could do about it, and my choice was final. It took Liam a while to come to terms with this, but he had to. After he moved out, our divorce was formalized, which coincided with the finalization of Jonathan and Emily's divorce. I sold my home in a matter of months and relocated to a different location in search of a better employment opportunity. For me, the move 3 years ago was a new beginning. I haven't communicated with any members of that family since. I talk to Jonathan sometimes, but not much else. I got a text message from an unknown number 2 days ago. Liam was the one. He called me and sobbed uncontrollably, telling me that letting me go was the worst thing he had ever done. He advised me to follow my gut at all times and to have battled harder to keep me. I asked him what was going on since I didn't want to hear his apologies. It seems that Liam was originally content after being married again, this time to Emily's friend. But Emily and his new wife had disappeared since last week. He initially called the police because he thought something horrible had happened to them. However, Liam was contacted again by the police, who informed him that Emily and his new wife were safe and specifically requested that he refrain from attempting to get in touch with them. In essence, his sister and new wife had fled with him, emptying his bank account. I hoped it was only a vacation and they would return, but if it was more than that, he was really screwed. Instead of consoling him, I had to fight the impulse to laugh in his face while he sobbed like a kid on the phone. He brought this upon himself and now has to lie in the grave he dug. Feel free to call me cruel, but that's the reality. I apologized to him for the situation, but I didn't understand why he was entangling me in his private drama. After he was silent for a bit, I realized I had made the desired remark. He paused, then added he wanted my assistance in attempting to find them. Since I had been the one to save him from his previous predicament, he also sought my advice on how to improve his financial situation. I informed him that I would not be assisting him this time and advised him to eat dirt. I made it plain that his issues were his own and that I had nothing further to do with him. I then hung up the phone. I hate to say it, but I was happy that he was at last taking responsibility for his acts. I had no desire to bring him back, and I was happy that I had divorced him. He forced me to put in a lot of effort to restore our fortune before revealing his true intentions in terms of cheating. I had been most hurt by that. I would have left the marriage the moment he admitted to gambling if I had known he would end up this way. But for nothing, I stayed, toiled, and made sacrifices. I was really irritated by that. Now that his behavior and habits are finally catching up with him, I couldn't help but notice how ironic it was that Emily would betray him of all people. First update? Due to the fact that this is fresh tea, I decided to spy on it. I learned that Emily and Liam's 21-year-old wife had planned a trip to Europe and was spending a lot of money. Their regular social media updates raise suspicions in my mind because the material is readily available to the public. They have shared content on Instagram and other social media sites, but I believe they have blocked every member of the family to keep others from learning about it. I'm currently considering telling Liam what I discovered. There is a part of me that feels that I ought to tell him and at least somewhat assist him. The other side of me is aware that if I assist him, he will become reliant on me and begin requesting more favors. Furthermore, if he employs his intellect rather than dwelling on his own misery, he will be able to locate them just as readily as I did. He told me he was at his lowest and needed my aid in another heartbreaking text. Though I haven't made up my mind yet, I'm thinking of giving in. Second update. Some new drama has emerged since my last update, which was quite some time ago. When I finally informed Liam what I had discovered, he congratulated me but, predictably, started requesting more favors almost away. I adamantly informed him that this was the point at which I would no longer take his cries or even his calls. Although he sounded insulted, he refrained from arguing. Since he hadn't phoned me back, I assumed that was the end of it. But my ex-mother-in-law called me in the middle of the night 2 nights ago. She seemed desperate as she said they were in legal hot water and wanted my assistance. I practice law. She clarified that Samantha, Liam's new wife, had actually eloped with him and that Liam was now facing threats from her parents to file an abduction case against him. I jumped out of bed like I was electrified. Liam and a 21-year-old had fled. Even though she was of legal age, the circumstances begged for emotional blackmail. I was appalled and outraged. It was unbelievable to me that I had ever been married to a man who was capable of such behavior. I informed my former mother-in-law that Samantha's parents' accusations would be deemed invalid if she had left of her own volition, and that they would have few legal options. My ex-mother-in-law broke down in tears at that point, stating that Samantha was now supporting her parents' allegations. Samantha was accusing Liam of having associated with her when she was a child and of grooming her. "I will not stand by him," she said. This realization completely blew my mind. After doing the arithmetic, I came to the conclusion that this was probably the reason Liam had been so adamantly defending Emily's infidelity, because he had also cheated and was grooming a child. I informed my former mother-in-law that they should all be put to death for manipulating the life and feelings of a little girl. They apologized for everything, and she pleaded with me to speak on Liam's behalf. I flatly refused, telling her that while I would be happy to challenge him in court, I would never stand up for him. Knowing full well that her dear son had cheated on me with a minor, used my money to rebuild his life, and was now facing the repercussions of his actions, I informed her that she had some audacity in asking for my help. After cursing at me, she ended the phone. My nights have been restless ever since that call. It still amazes me that I was once wed to a predator. No obvious indicators had been present, or maybe I had overlooked some minor ones. In any case, I'm sickened by the realization. Liam ought to spend the remainder of his life, possibly even longer, rotting in prison. I'm really sorry for the little girl. Even if they began dating when she was 17, Liam was 38 years old at the time, making him an adult with a child enrolled in school. The 21-year age difference was already alarming. Even worse, the fact that Emily had been friends with this girl raised the possibility that Emily had introduced them. If accurate, the whole family was involved in this poisoning. I'm glad I was able to leave this terrible household and preserve my future in time. Third update. Fortunately, no one in my ex's family has provided me with any direct updates. Liam and my ex-mother-in-law have both stopped talking. But Jonathan talked to me, and I picked up some knowledge from him. Emily and Samantha returned home in a matter of weeks, apparently. Samantha began altering her tale at that point. She declared her desire to divorce Liam and go back to her family, claiming he had groomed her. Involved, her parents threatened to file charges against Liam. Even though their case was based on dubious legal grounds, Jonathan clarified, it was sufficient to frighten the family. In order to keep Samantha and her parents silent and prevent any official accusations, Liam ultimately paid them a large sum of money. Liam's financial situation is now officially ruined. In all of this, Emily pretended to be innocent, saying Samantha had informed her that Liam had given her the money. They have no one else to turn to but one another, even though they all know it's absurd. According to recent information, my ex-mother-in-law and ex-father-in-law intend to downsize, so until they can work things out, the whole family will be living in a one-bedroom apartment. Liam has practically little money left in his bank account, and Emily works a minimum wage job. According to Jonathan, Emily contacted him pleading for crumbs, but he ignored her calls. She couldn't coerce him into giving her money in that manner because he has exclusive custody of their children. The family as a whole is extremely dysfunctional and codependent. I'm so glad I got away from their mayhem at that time. I'm glad I've moved on, even if I wish I had never interacted with them in any way. For what he did to the young girl, I can only hope Liam gets jail time. I have no doubt that if he can do something like this once, he will do it again since he is a criminal and a groomer. Sharing a one-bedroom apartment with his parents and sister is a form of prison in and of itself, even though I wish there were a method to throw him in jail. He's going to have a bad time. Fortunately, none of them have gotten in touch with me. I've blocked them on all devices and accounts, and I'm hoping that nothing further will happen to entangle me in their drama. I sorely need calm in my life since I'm tired of their mayhem. My golden child brother ruined my childhood, then framed and sued me after I married because he liked my wife. Hi Reddit, I need some guidance on a complex position I'm in, therefore I'm using a throwaway account. I just want this out there, so please pardon any errors. I'm a 43-year-old man who is the youngest of 2 siblings. To give you the whole picture, I'll attempt to give a chronological account. The golden kid in our family has always been my 45-year-old brother, Michael. He could do no wrong in my parents' eyes as a child. For instance, they encouraged him and helped him get better when he received poor grades, but even though I received respectable grades, I was disappointed. For graduating from high school, I got $300 and a pat on the back, while he got a new automobile and a huge celebration. Although we usually did our own thing, Michael wasn't a bad brother. I felt the desire to go out and experience life on my own, but I didn't really protest. I completed my MBA in 7 years while attending a university in a different city. I got a job back in our hometown once I graduated. With the exception of holidays and birthdays, I didn't spend much time with my family throughout this time. My brother barely made it through high school because he wasn't the best student. After he left college, my parents assisted him in opening a modest hardware store. Despite my happiness for him, I kept my attention on myself. I began dating Emily, who was 20 at the time, around this period. We both came from the same city and met in college. After returning home, we cohabitated, got jobs, and concentrated on starting a family. I presented Emily to my family over the 2008 holidays. I felt more loved than I have in years since they were unexpectedly kind and open. But I didn't give it much attention when I saw how much Michael was staring at her during the event. He soon began coming to my flat more often, first once every 4 months and then nearly every day. Since he visited in the evenings when Emily and I were attempting to unwind after work, it became bothersome. Eventually, I had to establish limits, which resulted in a heated argument with my parents. Michael expressed regret and made his trips more manageable by limiting them to weekends once every 2 months. I proposed to Emily in 2011, and we told Emily's family that we were engaged. Michael simply shook my hand and left the little celebration I had planned, but my parents were delighted. After that, he vanished for a few weeks. When we were married in 2013, Michael brought a guest, Laura, to the wedding. 11 months later, in 2014, they were married. I was having a happy marriage. In 2015, Olivia, our first daughter, was born, and in 2017, Chloe, our second. Laura messaged me in 2016 to let me know that Michael's obsession with Emily was the main cause of their breakup. I told her I was sorry and wished her luck. In our conversation, I also questioned Emily about her relationships with Laura. She informed me that from the beginning, Laura had been a little aloof and cold with her. In front of my family, I made the decision to confront my brother. I questioned him about why his passion with my wife was ruining his life. The inquiry caught him off guard, and he denied everything. Following a heated fight, I told Michael that he was no longer welcome in my home. Emily and my dad spoke with me and reassured me that Michael was still family regardless of everything. I made the decision to be friendly for everyone's benefit. We continued living our lives as it appeared that Michael was sincerely trying to improve himself. It was July 25th, and I can still clearly recall the day in 2018. While my wife took our children to see their grandparents, I was running a number of errands. My father called me after lunch and asked me to come over to their place. He sounded irate, and I could feel the tension when I got there. There were some members of my extended family there as well as my parents, who were attempting to comfort my wife, who was crying. They accused me of assaulting a girl at a party weeks prior and sent her threatening texts instructing her not to report it, which caught me off guard when I inquired about what had transpired. I had known Amanda, the girl in question, back in high school. I occasionally hung out with a wider group of friends, including her. Amanda claimed that I had attacked her after following her to her car following a club party. Along with her allegation, she sent screenshots of an alleged chat with my wife as proof. I was startled and perplexed. My parents told me they never wanted to see me again after my father gave me a heavy slap across the face. Emily was enraged and said we were finished. No one paid attention to my attempts to defend myself and show that I had done nothing of the like. I was told that Emily and the children would not come back to me, and I was essentially thrown out of the house. In addition, my father promised to come to my flat and get their possessions. I appealed with them to change their minds when my father visited the residence. Ignoring me, he packed some bags and warned me not to get in touch with them ever again. In addition, he threatened to turn me over to the police himself if I did. By the evening, Michael had posted Amanda's narrative and the screenshots to our WhatsApp group for our extended family. I was unanimously expelled from the organization shortly after. Friends from my group called me over the course of the following few days to express their displeasure and advise me not to get in touch with them ever again. I was a complete disaster at this time. I was unable to work, eat or sleep. My supervisor brought me in for a talk after hearing the rumors. He told me to leave the company to preserve my record, even though he couldn't do anything about the rumors without the police becoming involved. He threatened to fire me without severance and with a damaged record if the police were involved. A few days later, I reluctantly accepted his recommendation and resigned. I was still living in agony in the middle of August when I got 2 court documents, Emily's divorce papers and a letter of disownment from my family. When I went to my parents' house in my drunken and desperate state, Michael confronted me. I was assailed by him, who called me a disgrace to the family and said that my disownment was a wonderful thing. I could hardly stand and had blood running down my face by the time he was finished. Emily and my dad looked on from a distance but took no action. I eventually sat there in tears, realizing that I had lost everyone and all I knew. I remained cooped up in my flat while the divorce was being processed. The divorce proceeded as amicably as possible given the situation. I didn't have to pay child support or alimony because I was unemployed and my ex-parents said they would take care of the kids. Officially, I was divorced by January 2019. It was really difficult for me to try to put my life back together. I pondered confronting Amanda during this period, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized it may make things worse. Even without sufficient proof, a single phone call may land me in jail for 5 to 6 years due to rules in my nation that prioritize women. I had a serious injury in February 2019 and had to recuperate for roughly 5 weeks. Emily was still my emergency number when the medical staff called. No one came to see how I was doing, and she hung up. I had to get back on my feet, if only to keep a roof over my head, after realizing that I had wasted a large amount of my funds. I sold all of my furniture, settled my outstanding rent, and made the decision to start over in a new city after realizing I couldn't reconstruct my life in the same location. I started looking for a job after moving 2 hours away, but I was unsuccessful. I drank too much throughout this time, and I had constant thoughts of taking my own life. For months I grew accustomed to waking up from dreams in a cold sweat. I suddenly ran across David, a former college classmate, 4 months later. Back then, David was the quiet boy who rarely spoke to others. Seeing him after all these years was unexpected. He called my name after spotting me in a crowd. After exchanging greetings, we briefly discussed our lives. I informed him that I was seeking employment in the city. David stated that he had recently resigned from his position and intended to launch his own management consulting business. Later that day, he asked me out for a drink and, after we talked about our careers, he gave me a job offer. He claimed that he required some knowledgeable individuals. I nodded, believing that in order to keep my thoughts busy, I needed to immerse myself in my task. But before making a commitment, I told him I wanted to meet with his staff and talk more about it. David introduced me to another team member, Mark, 2 days later. He clarified that going forward, it will just be the 3 of us. I shook hands with Mark and explained that I had something to impart before we could continue. I revealed everything. My divorce, my disownment, the allegations, and how I had lost everything. I was crying as I described what had happened. David and Mark sympathized with me and told me there wouldn't be any problems as long as I didn't have any criminal history. I clarified that I had never been visited or charged by the police. David stated he would have a thorough background check done just to be sure. I agreed and fully grasped his point of view. I was living in a dilapidated rental at the time in order to save money. In case things didn't work out, I waited patiently for 2 weeks while still looking for work elsewhere. David called me 2 weeks later, and we got together that day. He welcomed me to the team and assured me that there were no accusations against me. Following that, I pushed myself into my work and, at Derek's suggestion, began going to therapy sessions. In addition, I joined a gym and used the punching bag to release a lot of my frustrations, increasing my weight from an average of 77 kilograms to over 105 kilograms. Since Derek was about Michael's age, we became gym pals, and I began to regard him as an older brother. I had regained a great deal of control over my life by the end of 2019. As the consultancy business flourished, revenue began to flow in. I started to recover, at least somewhat, after renting a lovely apartment in a respectable area. I understood that in order to truly move on, I had to take action. With his and his parents' approval, I went to court and formally changed my last name to Derek's. They welcomed me into many of their family events since they thought I was a wonderful guy. In an attempt to show my appreciation for their generosity and encouragement, I even acted as Derek's best man at his wedding. I made another attempt at dating, but it was unsuccessful because of my unresolved emotional issues, until I met Kim in 2020. Kim, 29, has half Italian and half Korean ancestry. At a coffee shop where I frequently got coffee and occasionally stopped to sit, I first noticed her. Derek once saw her staring at me and urged me to ask her out, even though at first we simply spoke for orders. She worked behind the counter. Later that day, after some hesitation, I asked her for drinks. She said she wanted to see me again after our wonderful evening. But I thought it would end like the dates I've had before, when I informed them about my background and they left. When someone left after hearing my story, I never held them responsible. I made the decision to share my background with Kim during our lunch date on our second date. Before I proceeded, I wanted her to be fully informed. I talked about the charges, the disavowal, and my difficulties letting go. Although she was caught off guard, she listened to me as I told her that I would never consider harming somebody in that way. Before choosing to keep dating me, I advised her to understand what she was getting into. Kim contacted a few days later and requested a meeting. She told me she trusted me and wanted to try our connection when we first met at the coffee shop where she worked. I couldn't think someone could welcome me in spite of everything, so I was doubtful and even started crying. We took our relationship seriously and found great pleasure in each other's presence. I felt like I was finally getting well for the first time. I even traveled to Europe with Kim for my first vacation in years, and it was incredible. We maintained continuous phone and FaceTime communication during the 2021 epidemic. Kim asked if she could live with me when things started to settle down in the second half of the year. I concurred because she was having trouble finding employment when her position at the coffee business terminated. I recommended that Kim look into launching a food business because she was an amazing chef. With her parents' help, Kim was able to establish a cloud kitchen by the middle of 2022 and start delivering food to the surrounding areas. Our lives were going well together. Even though I was still dealing with some mental problems, I no longer had suicide ideas. But sometimes the dreams persisted. Kim declared her pregnancy in February 2024. I experienced a wide range of feelings, including grief for the family I had lost, dread of beginning over, and immense delight. Emotionally, I was all over the place. After Kim reassured me, we eventually dozed off together. Kim was ecstatic when I proposed to her shortly after. My life seemed to be finally heading in the direction of stability and serenity. Preparations were underway as we decided on a mid-June wedding date. I genuinely thought that things were finally improving. I got a call at the end of May from an unidentified number. Someone was crying when I responded. "Hello, this is Amanda," she said. I recognized her voice right away and hung up in a fit of rage. My companion, Kim, saw my look and approached me with worry. I struggled to contain my anger and tears as I described who it was. Kim picked up the phone and put it on speaker when it called again. The man who answered the phone identified himself as Amanda's fiancé. Amanda wanted to be honest about what had happened in the past, he explained. With tears in her eyes, Amanda called and apologized repeatedly. I was too emotional to reply, so Kim spoke most of the time. "They will call back later," she told Amanda's fiancé. Kim called Derek to come over as soon as the call was over. Derek calmly listened to Kim's explanation of the circumstances. He hugged me and suggested that we set up a meeting at a lawyer's office so that Amanda's confession could be recorded in case it was ever needed. After I called my lawyer and told him everything, he set up a meeting at his office. 3 days after I informed Amanda over the phone, we met at the attorney's office. Amanda appeared completely defeated, and the only person beside her was her fiancé. My lawyer mediated the encounter, which was captured on camera. Kim supported me by sitting next to me. Amanda started going into great detail about what had transpired. The main point is this: my brother Michael and Amanda were having an affair in secret in 2016. The whole scheme to frame me was planned by Michael. He purchased a new phone, took my profile photo from WhatsApp, and used it to fabricate screenshots of my chats with Amanda. Amanda loved him and would do anything for him, so she agreed to the plan. I wavered between tears and fury as Amanda told me all about it. I genuinely believe that I may have faced assault charges if Kim hadn't been present. Even though my lawyer tried to be kind, Kim, who was angry and probably made worse by her pregnancy, gave Amanda a vicious verbal abuse. I fought back tears and rage as I questioned them why they were coming forward to tell me this. Kim also turned to Amanda's fiancé and warned him, "If you still marry this human garbage, then you deserve whatever happens." Mark, Amanda's fiancé, clarified that while they were intoxicated a few weeks prior, Amanda blurted out that she had assisted an ex in ruining a marriage. She eventually came clean after he pressed and questioned her about it repeatedly. If Amanda desired harmony in her life, Mark stressed that she had take responsibility for her faults. After assisting Michael, Amanda explained, he grew aloof and chilly toward her and ended their relationship 6 months later. She had spent a lot of time in therapy trying to deal with her guilt, but she was too afraid to come clean even though she felt awful. My lawyer intervened after everything was explained and recommended a 20-minute respite before proceeding. My lawyer went over my alternatives while Amanda and Mark went out. He clarified that I had sufficient proof to file defamation lawsuits against Michael and Amanda. Even though I was furious, I made the decision that this would not interfere with my impending wedding. In order to prevent causing trouble with my ex-family, I informed my lawyer that I would handle this after the wedding and told Amanda not to notify anybody else. Kim gave me a hug after the meeting and told me that she trusted her gut and that she felt relieved. I felt the same way she did. David and Derek were both my best men at our tiny wedding, and we then traveled throughout Europe for 3 weeks on our honeymoon. We both had an incredible time. During the honeymoon, I was able to enjoy myself, but the nightmares increased in frequency. Kim was there for me no matter what. I talked to my therapist about these emotions, and she said that in order to get closure, I would eventually have to face my former family. After giving it some thought, I made the decision to get in touch with Amanda once more in July. I offered her a means of avoiding financial catastrophe, but I also informed her that I intended to pursue legal action in light of her comments. I told her to go to Emily's office by herself and tell Emily what she had told us at the lawyer's office. During the talk, Amanda broke down in tears and disclosed that Mark had abandoned her. Although I hoped I could feel sorry for her, I informed her that I couldn't. I also mentioned that my brother was the target of karma, which had finally come up with her. It was a few days later that Emily texted me. I had always emailed her birthday greetings and wishes on our daughter's birthdays and holidays, even though I was blocked. I hadn't heard from her in 8 years until this communication. She wanted to speak with me. I told her I would give her a call in a few hours because I didn't want to have this chat by myself. With Kim by my side, I went home and made the call. I could hear Emily crying violently as soon as she picked up the phone. Once she had calmed down, she apologized and said how awful she felt. I was able to keep my cool and tell her how much it stung to know that she didn't think highly of me because she had fallen so readily into Michael's trap. I inquired about my girls with Emily. They were doing great, she remarked. She said it was 2 days ago when I inquired when she had met Amanda. She acknowledged that it took her a long time to realize how swiftly she had cut off contact with me and how mistaken she had been. She alerted my ex-parents to Amanda's revelation right away, and they were equally as shocked. They all wanted to get in touch with me, but Emily insisted on apologizing first. I informed her that her actions were really hurtful. "What about the golden child, Michael?" I asked her. "He was expelled from the residence," she disclosed. That made me laugh. Emily then revealed even another shocking detail. Michael had been her support system at that period, and she had married him a year after our divorce was official. Everything suddenly made sense. It appeared that Michael had never really moved on from her. She also revealed to me that she and him had a daughter. Following these disclosures, I outlined my conditions. In order for Emily to comprehend the type of guy Michael was, I first advised her to contact my extended family and tell them about all he had done. Second, I made it clear that, while I intended to co-parent my 2 kids, I had no plans to make amends with her beyond what was required for our daughters. Third, I told her that I wanted to face my ex-parents face-to-face and that I would text her the time and date of our meeting. Knowing that Kim's pregnancy may have caused her emotions to be all over the place, I gave her a hug after our talk. Kim wept for us both, but I controlled my own feelings. We dozed off while holding each other. My phone was off when I woke up the following morning. I discovered a deluge of notifications after charging it, including hundreds of messages and more than 150 missed calls. Additionally, I was added back to the family group chat, where everyone was expressing regret. Messages from former friends also arrived throughout the course of the following few days, apologizing for making snap judgments. All I could say in response to the family group was that I was an outsider now and would stay that way because I had been disowned nearly a decade earlier. I informed them that my terms and timing, not theirs, would determine whether or not I forgave them. I quickly exited and asked not to be added back to the group. A few relatives attempted to criticize me, expressing their disappointment with my response. After being so eager to assume the worst, I shut them down by telling them they had no right to criticize me. I instructed them not to get in touch with me until I first contacted them. After a few weeks, I gave Emily a call and asked her to come over for the weekend so I could have a good look at my girls. As resolute and fierce as ever, Kim demanded to meet her stepdaughters as well. She was resolute despite our arguments, which usually involved my attempts to persuade her to take care of herself due to the pregnancy. After a while, I gave in. At a public park, we first met. Despite her somewhat unkempt appearance, Emily had tried to look professional for the meeting. I got to see Olivia and Chloe for the first time in 8 years. They were so much bigger now. Since I had been restricted from all social media and communication channels, my phone was the only place I had any recollection of them. Emily came to me in tears and attempted to give me a hug, but I stopped her by raising both of my hands. Afterward, I presented her to Kim as my spouse. In the park, she collapsed into a weeping mess. We sat down close by as Kim stepped up to console her. I sobbed while giving both of my girls firm embraces. Since they had always known Michael as their father, my daughters were naturally conflicted when they learned about me for the first time. But seeing me triggered a flood of feelings. There was a great deal of talking and crying. By nightfall, Emily and I were exchanging life updates. She disclosed that because he had provided for her at that period, she had married Michael a year after our divorce was official. For the first few years, he had looked after her and the girls, but everything finally broke apart. Michael was forced to close his landscaping firm completely due to the epidemic, and it never turned a profit. Even though his parents were now using their funds to make ends meet, Michael resisted starting anything new. Additionally, Emily informed me that she was divorcing Michael because she could no longer bear to see him. It had nothing to do with me, but I told her she could do whatever she wanted. I outlined my goals for the future. In order to aid in our collective healing, I first requested that Olivia and Chloe join me for family therapy sessions. It was time to make amends for the loss of their biological father. Second, I wanted to spend weekends with Kim and be involved in their life, but I told them that this would have to wait until after the baby was born, because I needed to spend the time I had left with the new baby. Finally, Emily said my parents wanted to get in touch with me. They were not my parents, I told her, and I had the letter they sent with the divorce papers as proof that they had disowned me. Nevertheless, Kim and Emily both urged me to meet them, claiming it could provide me some closure. I reluctantly consented and informed Emily that I would choose the time and location of the meeting. In order to spend more time with my girls, I requested Emily to spend the night in the city and made reservations for her at a hotel. We spent Sunday together the following day, taking in the sights of the city and having a good time. Olivia and Chloe both hugged me tightly before I left, and I told them I would see them the next week. I informed Emily that I would come to the girls' family therapy sessions, saving her the trouble of driving them. We had a successful initial introductory session, and my therapist recommended a counselor in their city. The therapist told me that Olivia and Chloe would eventually have to find out what my ex-brother Michael had done. I told her it would happen eventually, but I still consented. The therapist also recommended that I share my tale here and look for other viewpoints on my circumstances. To be honest, I might not have progressed this far if Derek hadn't pushed me. What should I do next? That is the question I have for you. Even though I call my ex-parents, I still harbor feelings and emotions for them that I intend to address eventually. I don't know how to interpret that or whether it makes sense. How do I handle Michael? Should I file a defamation lawsuit against him even though I doubt I'll ever want to see his face again? I'm worried that anything I do to him could have a detrimental effect on my ex's daughter, as I know he has one. I will do my best to answer any inquiries you may have. My ex invited me to his wedding to show off his rich fiancé, but my unexpected +1 turned the tables spectacularly. I'm a 22-year-old woman who met Dylan, a 30-year-old man, while we were both working part-time at Starbucks. Dylan was paying off his student loans at the time, and I was still in college, saving money to move out of my parents' house permanently. Due to their excessive gambling, his parents had accrued large debts and were unable to provide for him. We first became close by talking about our families, but after a while we discovered that we actually enjoyed being together. 2 years later, I graduated and had saved up enough cash to live independently. Dylan, however, had not been able to leave his parents' home because he was still having trouble paying off his student loans. I invited him to live with me. But he was unable to pay even his portion of the rent because of his debts. I agreed to pay 80% of the rent, and he would pay the other 20%. He gladly agreed. We divide utility costs equally, excluding rent. Dylan and I worked at separate companies. I had a corporate career with a flexible schedule, while his job was hands-on and required him to be on site for extended periods of time. As long as I achieved my goals, my supervisor didn't object if I worked from home. Dylan was frequently unable to assist around the house due to his rigorous work schedule. I therefore cleaned, cooked, did the laundry, and did the dishes. Since I knew how hard his job was, I didn't mind doing the majority of the housekeeping. He was always the last to eat though, so I did ask him to carry out the trash. Sadly, Dylan would always forget, so I was left to carry out the garbage each morning. I had to leave for work one weekend. The house was in utter chaos when I got back. Empty food packets, chocolate wrappers, and unwashed dishes littered the kitchen counter. The trash hadn't been removed, and the wash had accumulated. I just wanted to relax after a hard day at work, but the clutter was intolerable. In the hopes that Dylan would notice and value my efforts, I cleaned all evening. He stated he missed me and gave me a warm welcome when he got home, but he didn't appear to notice the change in the house. Instead, he sat down to watch his game right away, which made me feel dissatisfied and undervalued. I started crying. For the first time, I realized how little he appreciated me, whether it was because of his lack of appreciation, his tiredness, or his insomnia. "Is something wrong?" Dylan questioned, looking back. I told him I was ready to go to bed and shook my head, acting as like nothing was wrong. I reminded him again to take out the garbage before I went upstairs. He replied with a nod. As anticipated, the rubbish was still present the following morning. I became irate when Dylan asked me for breakfast as he entered the kitchen. If he wanted to eat, I told him he could prepare his own food. I lost it when he accused me of being impolite. He was worthless around the house, so I screamed at him. He implored me not to be so theatrical and blinked as though he had done nothing wrong. After inhaling deeply, I questioned him about why he never took out the trash. "I forgot," he responded nonchalantly. After that, I asked him what he really did around the house except coming home and drinking beer while watching TV. He started out by saying that he deserved some downtime because he was constantly exhausted after work. After agreeing and nodding, I questioned, "How about me?" I reminded him that I cleaned the house, cooked for the two of us, did the laundry, and even ironed his shirts for the week after I got home from work. I asked him to take out the trash, and that was all. Dylan said he never requested me to perform such things, so he dismissed me. He continued by saying that his job was really difficult and that I should be able to relate to him and support him as his girlfriend. He even attempted to defend his position by saying that his mother had always treated his father in the same way. I was enraged to hear this. I became aware that, even though we weren't even married, I was allowing him to take advantage of me in spite of all the work I was doing to keep the house in order. I gave him a direct look and informed him that I would no longer be helping him around the house. We were meant to be equals, and I wasn't his mother. I told him he had to prepare his own meals, clean up after himself, do his own laundry, iron his own clothing, and take out the trash. He began to object as his eyes grew wide, but I stopped him with a raised hand. I also told him that he had to pay half the rent or leave. Incredulous, Dylan questioned the source of this. I clarified that I was fed up with putting in so much effort for him and not feeling valued. I left the house since I was running late for work, but he seemed to want to dispute. I had never set such firm boundaries in my life before, and I didn't feel bad about it. I followed through on my promise to do no more than clean up after myself. Seeing him fumble about the home to find clean clothing or iron his shirts before work was strangely pleasant. He didn't take out the garbage or clean the utensils, thinking I would do it for him later, but I said no. I chose to eat from takeout boxes so I could conveniently dispose of my trash without having to step into the kitchen when the dishes began to build up and the smell grew intolerable. Dylan made multiple attempts to speak with me, urging me to be a good partner and look after him, but I remained steadfast and uncompromising. When it came time to pay the rent, I told the landlord that Dylan would cover the other half and gave her my 50% up front. When he got home, he was furious and yelled at me to keep paying the same 80%. Reminding him that he never showed gratitude when I did, I firmly declined. I had finished assisting him. Despite his best efforts to make excuses, he was eventually forced to give the landlord his portion of the rent. He never once expressed regret to me during this entire ordeal. He never took the time to own up to his errors or show remorse for not appreciating the housework I had done. It was really disappointing. In retrospect, I wish I had recognized him sooner for who he really was. Our arguments continued to get worse over the following few months, with Dylan accusing me of being to blame for everything and attempting to deceive me into returning to my previous behavior. For Dylan, my promotion at work seemed to be the final straw. Dylan must have heard about it from one of our mutual friends, who happened to be my coworker, because that night we had the most intense argument of our relationship. After getting home intoxicated, Dylan woke me up and said that he needed to speak with me. Since he was obviously inebriated from the celebration with my friends that evening, I suggested that we speak tomorrow. I was so sleepy and irritated that I sat up in bed and asked him what was so essential that he had to wake me up in the middle of the night, but he said it was vital. Dylan then admitted inebriatedly that he had met someone at work. I realized right away that he was referring to Bella. He had brought me along to one of his office parties, where I had seen her. Bella was 25 years old, obviously quite wealthy, and the daughter of an industrialist. Her father's insistence that she required work experience was the only reason she worked. Dylan continued by saying that he was falling for her because, in his opinion, she was a real woman, in contrast to me. I honestly didn't care, so I stared at him without feeling anything. We were really just roommates at this time, and I knew that our relationship had been deteriorating for months. He went on to discuss his feelings for Bella, but I interrupted him in the middle of his statement. I told Dylan that I was pleased for him and didn't care if he was dating someone else. I recommended that we end our relationship amicably and that he vacate our home right away. Dylan inquired whether I was envious of Bella, seeming shocked. Telling him that I was genuinely relieved he had met someone else so I wouldn't feel bad about ending our relationship, I shook my head and grinned. Anger made Dylan's face flush. He said that my promotion had made me more self-assured. I told him calmly that our connection had nothing to do with my advancement. I had just come to the conclusion that we were no longer compatible during the last few months. I clarified that I could understand his desire to see someone else because we had evolved into more of a roommate than a love partner. Dylan began yelling, which surprised me because I assumed he would be relieved. He claimed to despise modern women, who show off their careers, like me. He said Bella was a lot better woman because all she wanted was to marry and have kids. I remained composed and reminded him that every woman had different requirements in spite of his yelling. I loved my job, but Bella might not care as much about it because she comes from a wealthy household. I advised him to be with Bella if he desired someone similar to her. I reaffirmed that we should stop arguing and that he was free to leave our home whenever he wanted. With wide eyes, he inquired about my ability to pay the rent. I clarified that I could now pay the full rent on my own without the assistance of roommates because I had received a rise. He started yelling at me after hearing this, accusing me of trying to brag in front of him. He continued by saying that Bella was wealthier than I was and even owned a home that her father had purchased for her. He insisted that I become more complacent and change who I was. Then he scoffed, stating that men ultimately desired a housewife rather than a lady who could make more money than they could. I was sick of arguing with him in the middle of the night, so I finally begged him to stop talking. I informed him that he could sleep on the couch until the end of the month, after which he would have to move out. Even though I could still hear him complaining, I chose to ignore him and resumed my slumber. Thankfully, Dylan began packing and gradually removing his belongings during the course of the week. As I considered the possibility of eventually having the entire property to myself, I began to feel excited. When I returned home last night, I was startled to see Dylan and Bella seated on our couch. I gave him a questioning glance, and he told me that he wanted to show Bella his apartment because it was his last night there. Knowing that I would return, I found it incomprehensible that he would bring another lady into our home without my permission. I greeted Bella pleasantly because I didn't want to be impolite and I believed that this wasn't her fault. I was shocked to see how disdainfully she regarded me and didn't even acknowledge me. I went to freshen up, not wanting to take anything personally. Later, Bella came to fetch some water while I was in the kitchen making spaghetti for myself. I felt uncomfortable for a minute as she stood there observing me. She looked at me with the same disdain as before when I inquired if she wanted anything. I chose to ignore her and carried on preparing my lunch with the intention of eating it quietly in my room. I was about to head downstairs after eating when I heard Bella and Dylan conversing. After dating someone who looked like me, Bella was telling Dylan how fortunate he was to have upgraded himself. Dylan laughed and agreed with her, and I froze in disbelief. When Bella questioned him about why he had ever fallen in love with me, Dylan replied something that broke my heart. Because I was naive enough to lend him money during college and pay for our dates, he admitted that he had taken advantage of me. He disclosed that he had been able to save a significant amount of money because I had been paying over half the rent for the previous 2 years. I was shocked by what I had just heard. I had assumed that he might have taken advantage of my kindness to pay over half his rent, but I was unaware that he had been taking advantage of me from the start. Bella and Dylan persisted in discussing our connection and making fun of me in every manner they could. I was on the verge of crying out of embarrassment, but I didn't want them to see me that way. I went back upstairs quietly and sobbed into my pillow for the remainder of the night. When I woke up the following morning, Bella and Dylan had left. He had formally moved out after gathering his belongings. I finally realized I was free of him, and I wandered around the home in a stupor. The sense of relief I experienced upon realizing that he was finally no longer in my house or in my life is beyond words. I danced around the house and shed happy tears. After that, I started to clean the entire place to remove all traces of him. I really appreciated being independent throughout the course of the following few weeks. What Bella and Dylan had said about me no longer mattered to me. Everything was well until 2 months later, when a mutual buddy told me at work that Dylan and Bella were getting married. It all seemed too abrupt, and I was surprised. When our buddy showed me their engagement photos, they looked like a happy couple. I acknowledged that I would never have been content with Dylan anyhow, but I also felt a twinge of regret for how he had taken advantage of me throughout the years. I was thus thrilled that he had discovered someone who could bring him joy. When I returned home that evening and looked in my mailbox, I discovered an unexpected wedding invitation. When I recognized that it was from Dylan and Bella, my eyes widened in surprise. Until I opened the invitation and noticed something scrawled in the corner, I initially believed it might have been an error or that he had invited me out of courtesy. "I want you to attend my wedding so you can see the grand life I'm going to have with Bella," was written inside the card. Slowly, it dawned on me that he had asked me just to flaunt his newfound fortune, his marriage, and his wealthy spouse. I inhaled deeply as I tried to figure out why he would invite me in this way given that all I had done over the years was look after him. My pent-up rage and resentment from all the years started to explode. I had to be petty with him, I realized. With a +1, I replied, yes. I was determined to make Dylan regret ever inviting me, and I had a scheme in the works. After turning on my laptop, I started looking through Bella's social media accounts. I looked at every photo she had ever uploaded. Fortunately, I was able to locate what I was searching for. Bella and her ex-boyfriend Jake had broken up just 6 months prior. They had obviously been dating for a very long time because she had multiple postings with him and their photos went all the way back to high school. Jake accepted my friend request from my profile, and I messaged him after he said yes. I was shocked when he answered, and we struck up a conversation. I informed Dylan that I was his ex and that I intended to invite him as a guest at their wedding. I told Jake everything since he appeared interested and wanted to know why I was contacting him. Jake talked candidly about Bella's repeated infidelity throughout the course of the following few weeks. I was unaware that she had recently had an affair with Dylan. He went on to disclose Bella's constant attraction to older males. He wasn't overly shocked, therefore, when she confessed her love for Dylan while they were still dating. They broke up fairly badly, as you may guess, and even though she told Jake they should stay friends, he blocked her everywhere. He looked to still be in love with Bella based on the way he spoke about her. I also shared with Jake my own story of Dylan's abuse of me throughout the years. I opened up to him about everything that Dylan had done to me and how Bella and Dylan had teased me. When Jake learned how Dylan had spoken about me and treated me, he was horrified. Jake listened to everything and eventually consented to come with me. I became excited when I imagined how my ex and Bella would have looked when they spotted me at their wedding to Jake. As anticipated, Dylan's eyes widened as he saw me entering with my special guest on the wedding day. He must have known right away that Jake was Bella's ex. We pretended to locate our assigned seats, ignoring his expression. I just grinned when Dylan approached me and muttered angrily, "Why are you here with Bella's ex?" He had to reluctantly make his way back up the aisle while giving me a fierce look because he couldn't make a disturbance in front of everyone. Everyone got up from their chairs when the bride was ready to make her entrance. With her father by her side, Bella looked lovely in her white floor-length gown as she made her way down the aisle. Following a flawless ceremony, the festivities were transferred to the reception area. Since she was wearing a different dress when she arrived at the reception, Bella must have gone to change. Jake and I had not yet caught Bella's attention. She stopped dead in her steps when she noticed Jake sitting next to me. Maybe still perplexed, Bella glanced at me and then at him. "What are you doing with me?" she asked Jake. Grinning, I informed her that I had asked him to join us as a guest in order to support her marriage. She asked Jake whether we were dating now, looking furious. Bella's cheeks flushed with rage, but Jake said nothing since this was an absurd question to ask in the first place. She gave me a sour look and nodded seriously when Jake asked if he could talk to her quietly since he didn't want her to make a scene. After they left, I turned to see Dylan hawkishly observing our exchange. Dylan appeared worried, but he was powerless to do anything but sit there and act as though nothing was wrong. The celebration went on, and everyone appeared to be having a good time, but an hour had gone by and the bride was nowhere to be seen. A few patrons began to take note and murmur to one another. When Bella's father became worried, he asked one of the bridesmaids to go see how she was doing. The bridesmaid ran up with a message in her hands a minute later. In front of everyone, she declared that Bella and her ex-boyfriend had fled. Everyone was stunned as they stood there. The bridesmaid went on to read the note in which Bella acknowledged that she had made a grave mistake by marrying Dylan and that meeting Jake had rekindled all of her old emotions. Dylan stood there looking vulnerable and ashamed as the visitors were further taken aback by the revelation. I was really astonished too. Even though I had brought Jake along to annoy Dylan, I never would have thought that things would end out this way. Dylan appeared as though he was prepared to rip someone's head off. Bella's parents really apologized for what had transpired and asked everyone to leave. I saw Dylan, who had once been arrogant and pompous, stand there by himself, utterly shocked by Bella's choice. Even though I feel a little bad about the wedding, I'm also relieved that Dylan's attempt to make me look bad didn't work out so well. The day that was supposed to demonstrate his victory over me had turned into the scene of his demise. Am I the A for spoiling my ex's wedding by bringing a special guest as a guest? Ever since I shared my tale, I have been getting conflicting responses. Some of you believe I went a bit too far, but many of you concur that I made the correct decision. I should make it clear that I never intended to ruin my ex's wedding and that I never mentioned it to Jake. I don't know what private conversations Bella and Jake had that led Bella to abruptly call off the wedding. Since my ex had asked me in the first place to flaunt his marriage to a wealthy woman like Bella, I just wanted to be spiteful with him. Bella's decision to end her marriage was entirely independent of me. I've texted Jake to ask him what happened, and I'll provide an update as soon as he responds. Second update. Jake contacted me. In a lengthy text message that he gave me yesterday, he essentially expressed his gratitude for my taking him to the wedding. He informed me of his and Bella's honeymoon, which she was scheduled to have with Dylan. Her parents, who were quite concerned about her, had also been consulted. He told me that he will be seeing me shortly to personally explain everything. Dylan, meanwhile, had been contacting me constantly since the wedding. He blamed me for ending his marriage in a series of hostile text messages and phone calls. I never responded to him, and I had no desire to converse with him. I was aware that I had nothing to do with Bella and Jake's joint escape. Dylan chose to arrive at my house today as he knew I would be home during the weekend. I initially requested him to go and wouldn't open the door. He insisted that he wouldn't go until he spoke with me. He could say anything he wanted to me standing outside my house since I warned him he wasn't let inside by opening the door a bit. Dylan began screaming at me, accusing me of ruining his life. He had apparently given notice at work, believing that after marrying someone as wealthy as Bella, he would never have to return. I brought Jake to their wedding, and he questioned me angrily why. I decided to tell him that I had overheard all he said to Bella that evening because I was becoming mad at him for blaming me. When I told him that I knew he had been using me to pay for our dates and his rent for all the years we dated, his eyes widened in surprise. He obviously didn't respect me, even though I assured him that I did all those things because I loved him. I also reminded him that I never bothered to become involved in his relationship and that I didn't care that much when he cheated on me with Bella. I was pushed over the brink though, when he invited me to their wedding and wanted to show me the life he would lead with his wealthy spouse. I informed him that he had no right to visit my home and scold me for something that wasn't my fault. He should be upset with Bella because she was an adult and made the decision to leave him. Dylan began to scream back that I shouldn't punish him for the past and that it wasn't his fault that I was so innocent that I didn't realize how he had been taking advantage of me for so long. As he went on to rave about how Bella was meant to transform his life and how he could have had everything he ever desired, I laughed at what he was saying. He disclosed that I had ruined his opportunity to flirt and woo Bella, despite his best efforts. I didn't want to listen to his statements any longer because they were so vile at this point. I threatened to call the police if he didn't leave my property. I pulled out my phone and dialed in front of him after he told me I would never dare to do that. As he was departing, he told me not to overreact and instantly retreated a few steps. I vowed to myself that this would be the last time I saw him before I closed the door. I have now told my family about the incident and blocked him everywhere. In order to document his actions and lodge a formal complaint against him in the event that he returns, I intend to install a camera on my door and change the locks on my property. Update 3. I haven't provided an update in a month. I didn't have time to respond to everyone who has been messaging me to inquire about whether Jake and I had ever met because I've been so busy at work. I'm glad to say that we did at last. A week ago, Jake said he was ready to chat and invited me to lunch. Bella was seated behind him when I arrived at the location. I thought Bella was coming to pick a fight with me, so I instantly braced myself. To my amazement though, she greeted me with a warm grin and a kind word when she spotted me. Jake reassured me that she was merely there to apologize, even if I wasn't really sure why she was there. Bella nodded and really apologized for her previous words toward me. She continued by telling Dylan her story. She disclosed that she would constantly receive a lot of attention and kindness from Dylan at work. They spent a lot of time together due to their hectic work schedules, and Dylan would often gripe about me and our relationship. He would express his dissatisfaction and his wish that he had a woman as attractive as Bella. She acknowledged that every time he gave her a compliment, she felt gratified and began to feel sorry for him. She got overly passionate and even slept with Dylan during a difficult time when she and Jake were going through a difficult time. Dylan then persuaded her to end their relationship by claiming that Jake wasn't suitable for her. Dylan kept messaging her, telling her that she was ideal for him and that they could live together. She eventually ended her relationship with Jake because she felt bad about cheating on him, and she believed that she could be content with Dylan even if they were different in age. Bella went on to describe how seeing me made her feel uneasy. She acknowledged that she coveted my independence and the fact that I didn't actually require a partner to look after me. She expressed regret for offending me. I explained to her how hard I had worked my entire life to get to where I am now at work and that I could understand her perspective. Her eyes were downcast as she nodded seriously. After that, I asked her to describe what had transpired at her wedding to Dylan. She admitted that she was taken aback to see Jake when I took him to the wedding. She had never felt the same way about Dylan until she saw his face and understood how much she still loved him. Jake told me that they discovered they still loved each other after they talked about their sentiments in private at the wedding. Bella left a note for her family, so they made the decision to flee together. They were deeply in love and had been together since that day. Bella told me that she discussed this with her parents. They were furious at first, but in the end they chose to stand by her. Additionally, she disclosed that she intended to apply for an annulment with Dylan shortly. Even though I wasn't totally comfortable hearing this, I was glad that at least two people were content following the terrible occurrences. I could tell Bella and Jake were beaming at one another. After eating lunch and continuing our conversation, we finally said our goodbyes. I haven't spoken to either of them much since that conversation, and don't want to be involved in their drama. I intend to continue working hard at my profession and concentrating on myself. I'm not sure what Dylan's future holds, but I hope he can eventually grow from his mistakes and refrain from pursuing partners for financial gain. Am I the asshole for calling the police after my mom abandoned my siblings at my doorpost moving out? When I became 20, I left my parents' house because it was intolerable. My name is Ethan, and I am currently 22 years old. They acted as though everything I owned belonged to them as well, frequently gave preference to my younger siblings, and utilized me as unpaid labor. When I moved out, my father, Mark, told me to remain away and not let the door hit me on my way out. I had been working at the same full-time job for almost 4 years, and I rented the tiniest and most economical apartment I could locate. Not even a month had passed when my parents, Mark and Emily, began phoning me to beg me to come back because someone else needed to look after my brothers. I said no, enjoying my newfound independence. Eventually, my father insisted that family should come before personal independence and made me move back and pay them rent. I responded that for once, I was living for me and that my life mattered too. We didn't talk for months after he said, "Let's see how long you last without us." I'm not sure what he was expecting, but I got along just fine without him. My family and I gradually began to patch things up once they came to terms with the fact that I wasn't going to return on my knees. They clearly found it difficult to accept that I now controlled the situation rather than them. Even though the two closest to me were in their late teens, they nevertheless pleaded with me from time to watch my youngest siblings. Since they had always thrown the babysitting load on me, my parents' refusal to take on the responsibility seemed hypocritical. They gaslighted me when I brought this up, and then they once more were silent for months. In the end, it was them who returned to seek my assistance. I recently purchased a used gaming console, but I was only able to afford the single game that was included. My mother requested me to keep my two youngest siblings for a bit one Saturday. I was left alone with them in my tiny apartment all day after she essentially pushed them inside and walked off. I contacted my mom and insisted that she come grab the kids, which is why she didn't come back until after 10 o'clock. She didn't like that I interrupted her enjoyment. I warned her that I would no longer watch my siblings all day unless she paid me, and that if she left them outdoors the next time, I would call the police and wouldn't even open the door. I discovered my gaming console was gone the following morning. I thought one of my siblings had taken it, so I contacted my parents. My mom said it could wait as my youngest sibling was playing on it and she didn't have the heart to take it away, even though I stated I would come over right soon to retrieve it. I claimed that it had been stolen without my consent and that I would be picking it up. As fast as I could, I rode my bike to their house. My sibling was crying when I got there since they were missing the charger and the console's battery had died. When I asked for it back, my father took it and told I could have it back if I helped out more with my siblings. I wasn't bluffing when I informed him that I would call the cops if he wanted to play that game. He refused to back down until I began making phone calls. My mother shouted, "Hold on." I swiftly reclaimed the console from my father. She claimed it wasn't worth having the cops come on them, but he called her a traitor and insisted she give it back to him rather than to me. I assured them before I left that I would not think twice about calling the police if this occurred again. They could purchase their own gaming console if they truly wanted one for my siblings. My father, Mark, screamed that I couldn't treat him in such a disrespectful manner. I retorted that I'm an adult, but he's never bothered to treat me with any respect, and I'd had enough. He then yelled at me to turn around and face him as I left. At the moment, they are once again silent. I once received a text from my mom, Emily, pleading with me to continue watching my siblings. Since I wasn't doing it for free anymore, especially after they stole from me and attempted to prevent me from reclaiming my property, I told her that if she really wanted me to babysit, she could pay me, but I would only accept the money up front. I am not their property. They can either adjust or become disoriented since I am an adult with a place of my own and a life of my own. Since that text exchange more than a week ago, none of them have gotten in touch with me, which is okay. They are capable of handling their own mess. Update. It's unbelievable that I completely forgot about this account for almost a year, but I happened to stumble upon my original post when browsing Reddit videos online. I've returned to provide an update after realizing that I completely neglected to do so. Toward the end, there will be some light fighting and police intervention. I thought I'd bring it up even though I'm not sure if that counts as a trigger warning. I recently wrote about my parents' refusal to return my gaming console after one of my siblings stole it, as some of you may be aware. If my parents ever drop my younger siblings off at my door without asking again, a lot of commentators advise contacting the police or CPS. I waited and waited, but it had been around 3 months since my mother had last called, and I wouldn't watch my siblings for free. Then it came at last. When my parents unexpectedly called to ask me to watch the kids, they pretended if the previous console incident had never occurred. I informed them that it had to be a day when I was off from work and that I would not babysit unless they paid me. I no longer had Saturdays off due to a change in my schedule. Since they most frequently asked me to babysit on Saturdays, I really asked my boss for it. Additionally, it was more cost-effective for me to take on an additional shift. As usual, my dad became enraged and told me to man up and lend a hand. As he usually promised to do at my age, I pointed out that he should stop acting as though he controlled me and that, in a technical sense, I was manning up for myself and my own life. However, he dumped a lot of his duties on me and worked on Saturdays so he could forget about them. I was finished with their demands, as far as I was concerned. My mother grabbed the phone away from him after he began screaming into it. Since Sunday is my sole day off, I stated that I could only watch on Sundays and that I would only do so if I was paid $40 and my siblings' lunches, dinners, and snacks were prepared in advance. Since feeding them isn't my responsibility, I wasn't going to waste my money on it. I also made it plain that I would call the police to retrieve anything that was taken from me, such as my console the previous time it was stolen. To make it easy for the authorities to verify that it is mine, I kept the receipt from the time I purchased it and wrote down the serial numbers. My mother became enraged and began to curse like a sailor who had just lost a tooth. Before she discovered I wasn't answering and began insisting I say anything, I let her vent while essentially ignoring the phone. My demands were Sundays only, $40, and prepackaged food, or else they could forget about it, I said to her and my father. On the other end of the line, there was a moment of astonished quiet. My mother then blasted me once again, claiming that my younger siblings, who are 13 and 16 years old, had to take over for me because I was no longer there and they needed a vacation. "Oh, like how you guys gave me breaks?" I asked, laughing. As never before. My mother attempted to claim that because I was the eldest child, things were different. I explained to her that it wasn't different at all. I had lost out on a lot of my youth because they had parentified me. It is hypocritical of them to pretend as though I should take over again now that I am living on my own without them. The two teens living with them are capable of doing anything I used to do. My mother went into victim mode and said that my adolescent siblings were disobedient and unheard. Since I was too busy living my life, I informed her that their issues weren't mine and that they needed to find another daycare provider. My father returned to the phone and began to scream at me once more. He was simply blowing hot air and not actually saying anything, so I just laughed at him. My mother retrieved the phone and begged me again. I restated, $50, prepared food, Sundays only, and I would not think twice about calling the police if I received threats or had any of my belongings stolen. My parents began arguing loudly at one another about what to do, so I told them to figure it out and get back to me later. I hung up after that. For a time, radio silence returned. A few weeks later, I was getting ready for work on a Saturday morning when I heard a loud, quick knock at my door, the kind where you can tell they're using both hands. I've heard my mom knocking for years to let me know she was there, so I'm familiar with the sound. What sounded like someone rushing noisily along the hallway after the banging. Hearing my two youngest siblings arguing and tapping on the door themselves, I listened through the door. My mom had just run off, leaving them outside the door. I had a straightforward strategy for this because of all the warnings I received after my last post. I simply rolled down my window, got out, and left. I can easily climb out of the window by just ripping the screen out of my ground-level apartment. I contacted my neighbor, a kind elderly woman who enjoys having children, who lives a few doors down, and gave her the scoop. She has long been aware of my predicament with my narcissistic parents, and she phoned the police so I could inform them that two children were left in the hallway after their mother beat on a door and fled. Let's just say that my siblings were picked up by the cops. Later, I got a call from my parents, who were very upset. I asked them what they were so upset about, acting as though I had no idea. When I inquired if my mother had simply left my two youngest siblings at my door without anyone answering, she completely acknowledged that she had left them there for me to watch before running away. She explained that I was already out because I had to work on Saturdays. After a few moments of silence, my mother screamed, "How in the world was I meant to know that?" I retorted that she was solely to blame and that she had practically left her children at my door, hoping that I might have been home on a day that I had previously informed her I worked on multiple occasions. By forcing me to watch them, she was attempting to make me miss a shift. She began offering justifications, but I told her that what she had done was unacceptable and immature. I waited for her to stop weeping for a while before asking if she was finished. She reverted to her hostile demeanor and kept shouting. She shouted that she was being charged with child abandonment by the police. She left the children in the hallway, so I replied that wasn't really my fault. Then I said that if I had been at home and she had refused to come back for the kids, I would have called the police on her too because I had already informed them that I now worked on Saturdays and I didn't want to be forced to babysit anymore. She continued to argue pointlessly for the remainder of the call, which didn't really accomplish anything. In the end, my mom just received a fine and a slap on the wrist because she persuaded the police that she genuinely believed I was home. At least that's what my next sibling claimed when he contacted me. The fact that she had to pay a fine should make her reconsider leaving children at my door and fleeing again, but I'm not sure how much it was. Since my dad was at work and said he didn't know she was going to leave my brothers at my door, he wasn't charged. He was reportedly furious with my mother for doing it. I couldn't stop laughing at this pot and kettle scenario. However, I suppose I must give my old guy credit because he had never done what my mother did. In any case, my mom now has a police record, which is, in my opinion, a first strike in the eyes of the law. Thanksgiving was the turning point after that. I was completely anticipating my parents' invitation to be a trap of some sort. It was too. My dad pretended to be in control while he sat at the table smoking a cigarette during supper. He said, enough was enough, and that he was ending this farce after having my mom sit me down. He informed me that they had no more time for themselves and that the fine my mom had to pay had a significant negative financial impact, so I needed to return home, help with the bills and mortgage, and help raise my siblings. Regardless of how much he tried to command me, I just answered no, and I continued to do so. Even though he's a big man, he became so enraged that he actually attacked me. Fortunately, I'm not either, having acquired some amateur fighting techniques and been going to the gym for months. When he came at me, I kicked him quickly in the balls because I was wearing steel-toed boots too, and then I struck him hard enough in the face that he fell to the ground in an instant. He landed with a loud thud and clutched his groin, vomiting from the pain. I then informed my parents that I could easily prove he attacked me first because I had my phone filming in my pocket the entire time. I complied with my dad's order to leave his house and never return, but not before stealing a turkey leg from the plate and riding home to eat it. The only people who have phoned or contacted me since are my siblings. I marched out like a boss, they claimed, and now Dad's poor balls are the subject of constant jokes in the house. I was invited to return for other holidays after spending Christmas with a friend's family. Update: my parents blame me for losing the baby because my mom was pregnant. I now see why my parents attempted to have me return home for Thanksgiving. I have just learned that my mom was expecting her 6th kid. First of all, shortly after my last post, one of my siblings discovered my Reddit account and showed it to our parents. In response, my parents stormed into my apartment and yelled at me, accusing me of being a horrible parent and of arranging for my mom to be detained. Yes, they are. Standing in my doorway, I yelled at them for all they had done, including putting my siblings at my door on a day when they knew I was at work. In any case, that is poor parenting. I would have called the police on Mom when she left the kids at my door, so it didn't really matter that I set them up, it wouldn't have mattered in the end. I replied that behavior alone confirms my belief that they are bad parents, and my dad appeared to be about to raise a fist in my direction. Then he said that if he tried to hit me, it would end the same way it happened the last time, and I didn't think my boots, yes, I was wearing them, could hit his balls again. When he remembered what I had done to him the last time, Dad appeared to wince and tense his legs together. In the end, he dragged my mother out by the hand and left. Before he left the corridor, he shouted back that since I was entirely to blame, he expected me to reimburse them for the fine they had to pay for child abandonment. I informed them that I owed them nothing and told them to fuck off. They remained silent in response. I received some extremely horrible news not long ago. After a terrible incident at home, where she tripped on damp porch stairs and fell face down in gravel, my mom, who was about 7 months pregnant, lost the baby. To be honest, when I saw her before that, I had no idea she had been pregnant. She's always been awkward and a little heavier than average, not fat, but just enough that it's hard to tell if she's pregnant or not. She definitely wanted someone to blame because this was her first miscarriage, which is heartbreaking. I destroyed the family by not assisting them and by costing them a lot of money, therefore in her opinion, someone had to be me. She was on crutches when she and Dad returned to my place to accuse me of being the cause. I didn't come home to help when they needed me, thus she lost the baby. I called them out on their attempts to blame me for something that wasn't my fault and their need for free childcare, which led to a quite heated debate. In any case, I assured them, it's not my fault that they became pregnant again when Mom was 45. Dad was too frugal to ever replace or repair the decaying old porch, so blame it on it. When I said that, my father put his hands on me once more and gave me a stinging right hook. I ultimately kicked his ass again after that. I've continued to train out at the gym, and I've gotten stronger since defeating him during Thanksgiving last year. There was no chance for him. My mother's yelling forced me to stop when I lost my temper and broke his nose and knocked out both of his front teeth. My father needed to be transferred to the hospital, so the police called and I was placed in handcuffs. Fortunately, my apartment complex's halls are equipped with CCTV, and I also had my phone camera recording behind me in my unit. When my parents knocked, I began to record. The video clearly demonstrated that I defended myself after my father hit me first. Since it was deemed self-defense, I'm basically safe, but now my parents want to sue me for my dad's medical fees and the fine they had to pay earlier. I defeated Dad, so he won't be able to go to work for a while. He has 2 lost teeth, a black eye, a broken nose, a neck brace, and who knows what else. He is also really upset that he had to shave off his beard. I suppose this makes him even more dead to me because I already thought he was pretty well dead before this. He no longer has the little authority he once believed he had as my father. Because of all the hard work I've put in over the past few months, I'm physically stronger than him and will soon be starting a new job that pays significantly more. I might be able to get a much better place to live after a few years of saving. When my oldest sibling became 19, they called to tell me that I was their hero for beating the living daylights out of Dad and that they were going to leave, just like me. However, my parents found out about my Reddit posts once my next sibling discovered them after hearing about them on YouTube. My mother apparently forced them to show her my post after overhearing them discussing it. They stated she broke items because she was angry. My siblings have expressed regret for letting Mom and Dad know, and they claim that if they had realized Mom was listening, they would never have brought it up. Additionally, both have expressed their happiness that there won't be another child. They already have to handle a lot of my parents' babysitting, which they detest. They acknowledge that they first blamed me for leaving, but they now understand that you have the right to choose your own path as an adult. Whether my parents will actually attempt to sue me is still up in the air, but I believe I can state that if they do, it will be a loss for them. My friend's uncle is a lawyer, and he promised to defend me in the event that my parents filed a lawsuit. He adds that since it was self-defense, they don't have much of a case. To my folks, who will most likely see this, leave me alone, please. That's all I have to say. My siblings and I are not your property, and I will assist them in leaving your home when they are old enough to do so at the age of 19. Both of you have always been self-centered egotists. It's not my fault that mom lost the baby, and it's not my fault that you struggled so much without me around to watch your kids for free. Think of that smashed nose and missing teeth as a good excuse to avoid me in the future. Remember that because of you two, I have only told you a small portion of the nonsense that occurred in my life. I could share story after story about the events in my early years if I so desired. However, I wouldn't be satisfied with it. So please, don't bother me. P.S. Yes, my mom had to give birth to a stillborn baby at the hospital, but I wasn't going to bring it up earlier. According to my siblings, my parents had a secret funeral among themselves, and mom brought home a little urn that she keeps in the bedroom. After leaving with the urn for a few hours, they returned intoxicated. My mom spent over 6 days in the hospital due to whatever injuries she sustained in the fall. I've contacted my siblings for further information. Someone asked if she had been shoved. I'm now doubting that myself. The only excuse I could come up with was that mom was in a hurry to be somewhere when she slipped and fell off the porch. I've heard of folks suffering more severe injuries in more foolish ways. When I researched the cremation procedure, I found that it would take 8 to 12 days to obtain the ashes. This indicates that the urn they brought home was empty. I'm completely perplexed. However, my parents' funeral took place a few days after mom left the hospital. Until the day of their small funeral, my parents kept that urn in the bedroom. They may have collected the ashes by then, I suppose. Perhaps it explains why they returned home intoxicated, but this situation is so strange and twisted that I'm having a hard time thinking about it anymore. Revise posting again so soon feels strange. I mentioned in my last post that my mom had a recent miscarriage following a serious fall. I had a bad feeling about the information I was given. I concluded that going directly to the source was the only way to obtain the truth after reading all of the comments I had gotten about it. I visited my parents on Sunday. They both appeared to be in terrible shape and were at home, sleeping. In addition to using crutches to walk more than a few steps, my mom appeared to be very exhausted. I saw that she had numerous bruises and bandages on her face from the fall a few steps from the door. My father. To find out how he appeared, read my previous post's depiction of him following the thrashing I inflicted. When I arrived, my parents were blown away. I insisted on knowing if there was ever a baby or if this was all a pathetic attempt to coerce me into returning home. After what happened, my dad claimed I had a lot of guts to show there and let myself in. However, my mother sobbed as she revealed that she had actually been pregnant. She stumbled into the bedroom and picked up a little urn that seemed really elaborate. It was filled with ashes. They didn't smell like anything, even when I looked to see if they resembled cigarette or barbecue ashes. I didn't really smell anything at all. Even though I had looked online and saw that it takes at least 8 to 12 days to get the ashes returned, I questioned why they brought the urn home and said that the ashes were already inside. Mom had spent no more than 6 days in the hospital. According to my mom, they purchased the urn online with the hope of retrieving the baby's ashes upon visiting the crematorium. They simply waited till they could retrieve the ashes a few days later and then went out to get drunk because they were so distraught that they couldn't bring the kid home yet. Mom said she begged the crematorium to do things a little faster. Her eyes were filled with real tears. Although I've witnessed her crocodile tears numerous times, this one didn't appear to be that. I learned more about my mother's fall and what transpired. She was late for her appointment with her physician, an OB/GYN, or whatever they are called. Mom clarified that she was attempting to get out to her appointment after oversleeping during her nap. Then, as she attempted to down the stairs, she slipped on a toy. About 3 years ago, the porch's guardrails deteriorated and snapped off, and Dad never restored or repaired them. Mom had nothing to cling to then. She fell straight off the porch, hitting the ground with her face and belly first. She even showed me the marks from her landing all over her stomach. She informed me that the child would have been a male. There would have been one more brother in addition to my 2 brothers and 2 sisters. Then Mom told me that because of her age and past injuries, a doctor advised her not to try to conceive again since her body might not be able to take it. It wasn't any easier to hear in person, but I kind of assumed that was the case after some individuals messaged me about it. At last, I posed the crucial query: why did she hold me responsible? Mom began to add something along the lines of, the day they showed up at my apartment was just really, really bad. But Dad interrupted her. It's all my fault, he screamed. I would have been there to help if I had followed his advice and returned home for Thanksgiving, and now I'm responsible for the death of a baby. I screamed back at him, telling him that he was to blame since Mom might not have fallen if he had actually bothered to fix the fucking porch. Furthermore, not that it would have made a difference, he didn't even bother to inform me that Mom was expecting back at Thanksgiving. Instead of taking sides, my mother simply left the room in tears as we kept ranting at one another. My dad was so red that he looked like a lit match. He shouted for me to leave his house and waved his ancient hunting knife at me. He told me I was no longer his son as I was leaving. He was always a bad father, so I informed him that I hadn't seen him as a father in years. I told him before I left that I would be requesting a restraining order and that he would have to deal with the authorities the next time he attempted to harm my siblings in the same way that he had done me. He will lose more than a few teeth, and if he attempts the same nonsense with my siblings as he did with me, I won't think twice about calling the police or CPS. He swore at me from the front door, saying things like, "You son of a..." I retorted that that was a slight to Mom, and he became enraged once more. After that, I saluted him with one finger and rode off on my mountain bike. So, I suppose that's the best response I can give someone. I'm not sure what the truth is if this isn't it. Does it matter now though? As soon as possible, I'm going to file for a restraining order, and once I start earning money from my new work, I'll be seeking to transfer apartments. After this, I'm not sure whether I'll feel like updating again. Unless my parents do something horrible to my siblings, I think I might be done here since I'm just going to be depressed thinking about all of this. I hope I've made my message clear to them. Even though I've already given Dad 2 beatings, he still held that knife with a hint of fear. He thought he was staring at a monster. Perhaps he views me as a monster, but if that means he never harms my siblings, then that's okay. Sir, he will be the monster.